Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Policy Panel. I'm Councillor Leslie Scott-Brutell and I'm the chairman of the panel and will be chairing tonight's meeting. To begin the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping. There are no practice evacuations planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Ronald Street. This meeting is being audio recorded for live broadcast over the internet, the council website, and will also be available to listen to afterwards. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, as this activates the audio recording and is required to speak from a position. Members of the panel use electronic devices to access their agenda and reports and may view and participate in social media. Visitors are also welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We may have a break at 8 o'clock, subject to the items remaining. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. So I'll start with introductions. Member of the panels and officers will introduce themselves, starting with Owen on my left.
Thank you, Chairman. Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer.
Rory Doyle, Strategic Director.
Rosa Tanfield, Group Manager for Neighbourhood Services.
Ben Plummer, Climate Emergency Officer.
Libby Britcher, Research Officer.
Councillor Phil Coleman, Marland Ward.
Councillor Lee Tate, Prettygate Ward, substituting for Reece Smithson.
Councillor Kevin Bentley, Marks 10, Layer Ward.
John Giles,
Councillor Jocelyn Law, Highwoods Ward.
Chris Pearson, Labour Council.
Chris Beerchurch.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager.
And me, Leslie Scott-Brutell. Right, substitutions. Thank you, Lee, for notifying or saying that you're substituting. Item 3, urgent items. There are no urgent items scheduled of interest. Councillor Bentley.
Well, I'm declaring interest as the leader of the County Council and Councillor for the climate change bit, because as you're talking a lot about the County Council, we're ahead on climate change work. So I will just get that out of the way now.
Thank you. Minutes. There are no minutes to approve. Owen, would you like to expand on that, please?
Yes, apologies, Chairman. We have no minutes from the previous meeting yet. I can assure members that they have been produced and have been through officer review, so they'll be ready for the panel to consider at its next meeting.
Thank you. Have your say. We have nobody asking to have their say at the moment, so we move on to item 7, which is city status. I understand we have a speaker. Sir Bob, would you like to come to the table?
Chair, I was hoping the officer would give the verbal report.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I'll go with that. I do have a statement that was sent to me from Dorian Kelly, which I'd like to read out prior to the officer. statement. This city will live or die by its culture, its heritage and its tourism. This is the one opportunity that we will have to relaunch and rebrand Colchester in the eyes of the nation, to showcase what we have, which is a great deal. There will be no other opportunity for a relaunch, so it is essential that it is comprehensive, inclusive and of national interest and extends over the entire year. It may be that which is being planned is all those things. We'll have an overall theme, a common logo and a memorable strapline, which will catch the imagination of the national press and the media. There must, of course, be train and hotel packages and a huge press and social media effort. Ideally, you are appointing a professional artistic director to coordinate all of this. But we already have the makings of a huge year-long festival and its fringe. As you will know, Colchester has more artists, sculptors, digital artists, musicians, poets, actors, orchestras, choirs and comedians than the rest of the region put together. Although, be warned that this is rapidly changing as other towns and cities such as Chelmsford and Ipswich begin to realise its potential and its financial value and appoint arts development professionals to manage its offer. Sorry about that. Colchester Events Company have done a good job in enabling larger concerts, and this year the lights switch on and the light trail. However, for the past 25 years, most of the activity, and by far at the least cost of the borough, has been from the private and voluntary sector, who have provided a huge variety of festivals, ranging from the medieval fair, the food and drink festivals, Roman festival, film festival, theatre tours, inside and outdoor, the anti-loo roll festival, children's festivals and the eco festival, EA Sustain, the Fringe Festival, Invasion Colchester, Colchester in Bloom, Pride, the Chinese and Indian festivals, such as the Rice and Spice Festival and the Chinese New Year, Mind, Body, Spirit, the beer festivals, the large-scale street festivals of 2000 to 2007, Mendy Carnivals and the Samba Rambles. Big Sundays and countless music, poetry, orchestral and choir concerts. The waiting room, slack space and other providers kept the flag flying for years and years. And of course, we have no fewer than the national portfolio in the largest keep, the most intact Roman wall, the 2 Roman theatre sites, Jumbo, the only Roman circus, the Saxon doorway, its textile and engineering heritage, Dedham, Lavenham and Mersey. However, not one of these independent providers of these events has been consulted or any offer made to include us in any shape or form. No focus group or committee has been formed, no overall shape determined, and it is getting too late. We can all contribute a huge amount. We can make the difference between a damp local squid and something that catches the nation's imagination and makes people want to come here in huge numbers, which will eventually be worth millions in economic activity. We can provide all this, but the city must coordinate and market it properly. Thank you for listening, he says.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll give a verbal update this evening just on work happening in this area. And as a precursor actually to a more detailed look at this at the panel next time round. So I think we've got an item scheduled in the work plan for March. I'm going to break it down into 2 main strands to this status work. There's the year of celebration, which is very much the subject of the Have Your Say item there, and also the legacy work in terms of what does being a city mean for Colchester, for our whole place and the opportunity that comes with that. So just as an overview, my colleagues from an officer perspective, Lindsay Barker is leading the overall city status work and the legacy programme, obviously in collaboration with Cabinet and portfolio holder. And Lucy Bredman, from an officer perspective, is leading the year of celebration work, again, alongside portfolio holder and Cabinet. Now, as you would expect, we are taking a collaborative approach to both those strands of work. And I will just start with the year of celebration to start with. So the calendar of events is still developing, but the key ones already scheduled are in the new Colchester Visitor Guide 2023. And I think at this time of the year, ordinarily members get a contact from the portfolio holder with regard to the calendar of events that are set out in the visitor guide. And I know that's Councillor Cox's intention, but I understand that she's been away. But you can already look at that in terms of the calendar of events, and you can see that the city status and the year of celebration are very much embedded in those. So these are events that are happening across Colchester, with various organisations and businesses delivering them, as we've just heard. It's not just events being led and delivered by the City Council that are focusing on and taking the opportunity to celebrate our city status. It's quite right. Yes, some would happen anyway. We have a plethora of fantastic events that take place, but we are taking the opportunity to bring city status into that kind of arena. Which of course does help in terms of the budget that's available to deliver something like that, and we absolutely should be working with partners. Just to make you aware, the big showcase events planned from the council's perspective are the Siege Spectacular, which is running over a weekend in August, 19th and 20th of August, and the Gladiators exhibition at the castle, which begins, I believe, in July and running through until January 2024. Both will be big events and should drive visitors to the city and be something for local people and groups to be proud of and hopefully get involved in, as you'll appreciate. But in addition to that, the year of celebration includes a marketing campaign. So again, that was touched on in the Have Your Say item, and this is being led by the BID and supported by the council. And this will utilise the collaborative marketing resources across those key organisations and businesses to spread the word and attract people to Colchester, both the city centre and the wider areas in our place, including attractions and locations in rural areas. A suite of city council marketing tools has already been developed and will be shared for use by all, and I believe that's being launched on 16th of January, so next week. So a suite of tools for us all to be able to use in terms of marketing materials, kind of backgrounds, signatures, logos, etc. And you'll be pleased to hear that a volunteering celebration event is also being planned, and as you would expect, being led by Community 360. Visit Colchester are very much showcasing the year of celebration events and activities. I will take away the comments made by the Have Your Say item this evening and feed that back into Lucy in terms of the collaboration and engagement with partners. And my understanding is that's very much been part of the approach up till now, and certainly will be the case going forward. Just to make you aware, the City Council's Creative Events Fund, so again, touching on creativity and arts. So we have a Creative Events Fund that has just been launched, and this has a focus on Colchester as a city, and it's very much looking for applications to demonstrate a delivery of high quality cultural experiences to local audiences, to develop and showcase our local creative talent, to celebrate and explore and raise awareness of our local heritage, encourage visitors to Colchester, as you would expect, and to celebrate our diverse communities. In addition to that, I know colleagues are looking at things like dressing spaces and places, bunting and flags and the like, mindful, of course, of the coronation and the appropriateness and how we'll look at that going forward. Engagement certainly is happening with education partners, and this is through the Cultural Education Partnership led by Steve Mannix from the Mercury. And marketing videos developed jointly by the BID and the council are being used at every opportunity in places like First Sight, at local events, at local cinemas, etc. And we are also collaborating with the Ambassadors Group to promote opportunities with them, and I know they're very keen. I'm going to move on to the legacy work now, and there is some crossover, particularly around the marketing and branding. But again, as you'd expect, very collaborative approach is being taken in order to kind of develop a city vision, a strategy, and a delivery plan for the long-term legacy of what it means for Colchester to be a city. Now, the reason this is a verbal update, and we'll get into the detail in March, is because there's been lots of meetings happening in recent weeks and indeed just before Christmas. I know Councillor King, Lindsay Barker, from an officer perspective, have been doing the rounds of the key boards across Colchester. That's the We Are Colchester, Our Colchester, One Colchester, Team Colchester, and very much received endorsement from the chairs of each of those boards, and a request, as you might expect, not to create another board to look at city status, but to very much look at the collective ownership and resources that we have in those boards, which is vast, use those assets that exist already and those partnerships that exist already to really promote this piece of work. As touched on already, before Christmas, there was a meeting with the Colchester ambassadors, and they were very keen to support the city status work as an opportunity to refresh their own roles. They have asked for greater clarity over what they can do, so we'll certainly be working with them. Now, to make this happen, a coordinating group is being established, which will involve the chairs of each of those boards that I've discussed, and the ambassadors and key officers across those boards, and wider stakeholders, to develop this approach and the programme. And the two initial key strands of that work are very much around marketing and branding. Will link in closely to the marketing and branding that's already in place for the year of celebration, and you know that will very much be supported by BID, the Our Colchester board, to develop that work stream. Lucy is leading this, as I said, from an officer perspective, and it is likely that this will very much broaden its scope to link to inward investment in terms of marketing and opportunities associated with that, and hopefully the value that the ambassadors can bring to that work as well. Then from an engagement perspective, there will be a full programme of engagement over the coming months to understand what city status means to our businesses, to our residents, to our communities, and importantly, what city status can unlock for each of them. And all of this, hopefully, the plan will be to enable a shared vision for the future to be developed, and key themes from that will be set out in subsequent work streams. So as I said, Lindsay is very much coordinating that from an office perspective, and I'm keen to emphasise this evening that central to that will be engagement with members in particular alongside your communities. So more will very much follow when we pick up on this in detail in March, and I believe Lindsay, Lucy and colleagues will be attending that meeting.
Thank you, Rory. Just for clarification, can you just remind me the ambassadors? We talk about the ambassadors, but I think if anybody were to watch this, they would be intrigued as to who our ambassadors are, please.
So the Colchester ambassadors are kind of prominent business colleagues in Colchester. They obviously bring a diverse and wide skill set outside the public sector, so that private sector mindset, which we very much want to take advantage of.
Thank you. Would you like to come to the table, please, Sir Bob?
Thank you, Chair. Another agenda item is champions. I always thought every councillor is a champion already, so I'm not sure why we need to dress that one up. In the report you read out and the officers given, there was no reference to a permanent structure. Now, Colchester Borough Council managed to miss the millennium, the Diamond Jubilee, the Golden Jubilee. There's nothing in Colchester. And so for the Platinum Jubilee, we should have had something in mind anyway, and we're now out of the Platinum year, nothing happened. We have a chance to make amends with the city status, although we're now 6 months down the line from when 6-7 months, and nothing has firmed up on that. So I'm hoping the committee or the panel will say we must have a permanent structure. You might want to get a committee going for the third millennium so as we don't miss that one. The thing that concerns me the most is that the spectacular celebration of the Siege of Colchester, that is not something that should be celebrated. You don't celebrate death and destruction. By all means, have that event as a commemoration, but please not under the umbrella of the city celebrations. The siege of Colchester in the summer of 1648 destroyed the economy here for 2, 3, 4 generations. It's also the small point that royalty, Her Majesty, the late Her Majesty, gave city status to Colchester. Colchester was for Parliament. It was the royalist leaders who were executed. Doesn't strike me as being a good idea to celebrate the late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II giving us city status, and then to celebrate a battle. 10 weeks, this town starved. Hundreds, if not 2,000 or 3,000 people, we don't know the precise number, lost their lives within yards of where this building is. And you're going to have a celebration of death and destruction. That's not right, is it? It cannot be right. I think it's important to have a program of celebration. I think the siege battle reenactment be separate. We've done it in the past. I think it was 25, 50 years ago, whenever it was the previous commemoration. That can be done. That's not a problem, but not under the umbrella of the city celebration. I'm looking forward to what the engineering heritage is going to be. I'm glad you asked the question about ambassadors, because that one was over my head. So I'm not sure what the ambassadors have been doing, when they were formed, whatever else they get up to, but that's a new one on me. So thank you, Chair, for raising that one. But I noticed in the roll call, civic society was not mentioned. Residents associations were not mentioned. The army and university were not mentioned. Sports was not mentioned. It was all on arts and culture, which is a very important part. Nobody's arguing about that, but there's more to it than that. Please, I finish on this one. Don't celebrate death and destruction.
Thank you. One of the reasons I love this panel, and I love Have Your Say, when people come up and they come up with things that sort of like, oh yes, that makes sense. Yes, thank you. Thank you for raising that. Councillor Bentley.
Well, first of all, I have a declaration because my wife is one of the cultural ambassadors, but I agree because they have their own website. But I have said it, and it was a construct of the former chief executive here, and the idea of it is very good. But I kept saying, but councillors know nothing about it. Even to Karen, I have said this. The plan was to keep away from the political arena, which I sort of understand because business people don't necessarily want to get involved in politics. But nonetheless, if they're ambassadors, they need to be seen to be doing more. And I say that consciously. My wife may listen to this, although I'm also pleased that they are seen as prominent business people. I will be telling her that as well. But it is important, and I do think that needs to be highlighted. Having business champions or ambassadors, whatever, is good for this city. It's very good because they will go out to different networks across the country, across Europe, across the world. And you think of Woods, because that is absolutely global, promoting culture. So that is a good thing. I think we just need a bit more coordination about it. So I would agree with that. May I carry on? Because I've got a few points since I've got the floor. I couldn't agree more about the celebration of the siege. It is an important part of our history, but it's not a celebration. Because we don't celebrate the First and Second World War, we commemorate the First and Second World War. It's the same theory. History doesn't matter, years don't matter. Death and poverty and destruction is always the same, whichever century we're in. So I think we need to be mindful of that. So I absolutely agree with that. And also a permanent structure. If we were in times, we'd probably build an arch, wouldn't we? But we're not going to do that now. But therefore, the engineering history of this city, I think that if you walk around as I do quite a lot, and certainly at St Botolph's train station I use virtually every day, there are bits and pieces around here. We haven't done anything really big about our engineering history. A large part of this building was built on philanthropy of engineering companies and engineering people of the past, and some of the pictures around this very room. And I just think we need to do something certainly on engineering, but there needs to be a permanent structure that says this is Colchester. And I applaud the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I think that's phenomenal. And all power to your elbow on that, Sir Bob. And I still have my mugs and they're great. But I would say we need something that is very permanent to say we have arrived. This is a city. Once again, a city. And that should come from public subscription. I would certainly agree with that. I don't think you necessarily take taxpayers' money to do it through public subscription. And then people feel they want to give for the decades. If I may just going on to the coronation. So I think, mindful of the coronation, correct, but actually why not combine it? That's a great celebration. If you did that in the year of Costa, think about how we could use our churches of all faiths who could put up bunting and celebrate both the coronation and the year of Costa. I think that'd be fantastic. And churches, you know, there's some bit of religion, whatever religion it may be, in virtually every part of our community, right across rural areas, urban areas too. Let's think about that, and other organisations as well. I think that's hugely important. Engaging residents associations and the parish councils, hugely important. Huge, and town councils, I shouldn't forget that, hugely important, because they are actually, certainly legally, parish and town councils are the third tier of local government. So I think that's hugely important. Let's spread that and let's talk about how we can engage with them. Not having another committee, well, I'm all in favour of never having more bureaucracy, but on the very next what you said, Mr. Doyle, you could, of course, have the chair of chairs, since you've got the back of the chairs, put them together as an overarching panel, because then you've got the views being fed up from all of us. I'll leave that with you to think about and to talk to them. And my final point is about the rural areas. You did mention other parts of the community. The danger is we always think about city centre, not town centre, city centre. I think we should start calling this the historic city centre, because of the expansion of this city. We have Stanway, we have the northern approaches, which are becoming sort of urban areas in their own right, and people gravitate there, may not come here. One of the selling points of this is its history. All those places have history, but they've expanded in recent years. This has history for 2,000 years. And if you walk, you know, from what was the garrison right up to the castle, you're walking through 2,000 years of history there. So I would start using the brand historic city centre. Just my view, but I think we should start doing that. And then you're identifying the very place, and that becomes an opportunity. People say, I want to go see that. If you go to they have historic city centres apart amongst a bigger conurbation of other areas in the city. And I think we should start thinking about that. But in the rural areas, we have a huge opportunity. So farming is a huge industry within these city boundaries. We should think about farming. Fishing, I sit next to a fisherman here. Fishing is a huge, or was a huge, but nonetheless, it's still an important part we do here. And the oyster, of course, which we celebrate once a year, which I would gauge 5% of the population know nothing about, because it just happens in the room. Lovely event, but we need to celebrate that wider, because Colchester natives are sold on the west coast of America. Colchester natives, you know, it's fantastic. Again, some places, of course, they call them Mersey natives, depending on where you are. So I think I'm saying this in a supportive way, of course. I think there's huge opportunity. My final point was Bob's final point. Let's not celebrate death. Mark it, but don't celebrate it.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Rory, would you like to respond to any of those points?
Yes, so thank you both for those comments, and certainly we'll feed that back in to the group looking at this. You'll appreciate the intention very much would be to look at that sensitively. I guess the reality is it is a key part of our history, and huge numbers of people come to visit us at that time whilst the siege reenactment happens. So I think I appreciate we need to be careful and sensitive with how we manage that. So absolutely we'll feed that into portfolio holder and to officers in this work. In terms of just reiterating the intention to engage, consult, there will be lots of opportunity to do that. We'll hear in a moment actually around the survey around the strategic plan, and you will hear themes in there around the need to continually consult with residents. So parishes, residents groups, absolutely on the agenda. And as I think I intimated at that, and I know Lindsay will say more next time round. And equally, some of those partners that I might not name, Bob, specifically, are very much part of the some of those wider boards. So One Colchester is a good example of that. The garrison are part of that. The university are part of that. Sports groups are part of that. So their voice will be represented, I hope. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance. Councillor Bentley, all those points around the wider areas, the historic, I know those will be very much in people's thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Pearson, I missed you.
So do you want to give Sir Bob his riposte?
That sounds like a very good idea.
I'd like to thank the officer for that summary. That was very good and comprehensive, and I thank him. Thank Councillor Bentley for all he said, and I've particularly picked up on historic city centre. I think he's absolutely spot on that. And yes, the reenactment of the battle is very important. All I'm saying is that it's not branded under the city celebrations. It's a standalone event, but don't put it under the city celebrations. That's the only request I make. I want to go ahead, all I say is not as part of the city celebrations.
Thank you. I was going to invite Councillor King to the table just so that if he has his two penneth, he's more than able to put his two penneth forward.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to give you a pennyworth. And it starts with thanks, as I'm always pleased to be able to do, to members for the contributions. And what I've heard is very much what we're planning to do. And the one thing I'm adding, the pennyworth, is that the border boards, the coordinating group met today. And it's great to hear that, if not great minds similarly, we are on the same kind of track on here. So, we will get things moving at pace. I think it has to take a little while to get ourselves straight. It's not so long ago since we formed up in a full and formal kind of way. But there is a fantastic energy out there and a real willingness to sort of have a crack at this in a collective way without adding bureaucracy to this, that is necessary. Roy, you've done a great job of capturing all that is running, and given so much is or is about to, and that's no small achievement, but it will absolutely include marketing the city in a very a much deeper, richer way than we've done before to really make the most of the opportunity that is come. To do so, combining what we're doing. So you can't stop businesses wanting and needing to press their own message, but to say that we've got to do this in a collective, much more, in my view, a more joined up and more mature way. I hope that we'll be able to pick up the difference between celebration and commemoration along the way. The marketing of all we do and all we've got to offer, we'll make some distinctions, I'm sure, in the way that we handled it. The initial drafts were celebrate, commemorate. We thought that was all a bit too much, but I think there's a distinction we can make a good communicator, Kevin, and you'll understand that we will get there. The last point from me, other than saying thank you on it, and is the importance of communications. We were talking about that this morning between these border boards, and we recognise the need to spread out the word to get the engagement running. You will see more, hear more. We will make sure that, Rory, members are kept fully up to speed, and the voice of this panel is part of that. Or I should add, ambassadors, regenerating that group, giving them a focus. Had a meeting already the last few weeks, very much around city status, the legacy of that, and how we use that to drive for us all towards a better life and better economic prospects and quality of life. Really wants. So the challenge will be to turn that enthusiasm into real engagement and endeavour, but we are on it, and we'll pick that up as a specific, that there is not enough understanding of what they can do and what they should do. That's all I've got to offer, Chair, but I'll take a question if there is one.
Thank you. We have two more speakers, Councillor Pearson and Councillor Coleman, and Councillor Laws and Councillor Giles. That's somebody come forward.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think what the contribution so far have suggested to is that how important it is that we have something in writing when we have these items on the agenda, because members and the Have Your Say speaker have obviously picked up things that we should have been picking up, and ensuring that they are properly explored before we go to putting something down in stone about how we're going to move forward. And I'm just slightly concerned that we are waiting until March before we get that before us. So I think there were some very cogent comments and remarks made about celebration versus commemoration. The one thing that I just wanted to remind Councillor Bentley and Sir Bob about is that historic centre of Colchester is in fact not in the centre of the city, but is on the edges of the city. It's in Shrub End, Beerchurch and Prettygate. So we need to be careful when we're talking about history, you know, that we don't just focus on one part of the history of the city of Colchester.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Chair. As you would probably expect, I'm going to throw in young people and schools at this point. 40,000-ish plus of young people under 19 in this borough who will be the future residents, future parents and future employees. So I'd also chuck those in for how is another matter consultation. But if we ignore them, they're going to be the future of the city coming forward in the next decades. So I'll just add that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ross?
Hello. Thank you, Chair. Yes, sort of echoing that sort of partly takes my point. I was keen to hear that you said that I think schools were being engaged. Is it through Steve Maddox, through the Mercury? I think that is really key, because I think that that will really capture and get the enthusiasm going of the next generation, and children will often be so enthusiastic, and then that will ripple out through families. You know, they create pieces of artwork at school, and that gets shared amongst, you know, that really gets the message out. So I think that's really key. And also, in terms of you talking about toolkits of resources, now, will that be something that can be shared with, say, community organisations and, say, towns and parish councils? Because I'm very mindful as well that we're talking about a lot of events that might happen in certain parts of the area. I don't want residents, you know, I come, say, from Highwoods, but there are parts around Mile End as well, newer areas where we have, you know, new buildings, newer residents, and I really want those people to feel part of celebrations. You know, and we were talking to people mentioning things like sports, and we've got, you know, Northern Gateway and a sports park there. So just being able to link things in, you know, I think it's really important to link in with current events, and I can imagine that, you know, the branding and marketing will be key. So, you know, I just think there's lots of potential, but just to really make it an inclusive, you know, event. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Giles, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Slightly just in the sense that, you know, commemoration, whatever. You know, how did the locals feel when the castle went up? You know, I'm sure they thought that was absolutely marvellous. That was slaves building the damn thing. And then the Normans, generous, thoughtful, kind, you know. And of course, Boadicea, how many thousands were obliterated? Point being that people like the reproduction of a good puncher. Sounds dreadful, doesn't it? Sealed knot. They're so popular, these things. Now, I agree that how you sell them is you've got to be very careful with it. And in principle, I think you're right. It shouldn't be a celebration, but it's part of our history, whether we like it or not. Humpty Dumpty. I think we could have had Humpty Dumpty mugs and various things, you know, as well as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So there is that, but also, I think Kevin mentioned it, was I have to get a Stowmarket to see a museum of Paxman's wonderful products. Stowmarket. For God's sake, you know, we were one of the best engineering towns in Britain. And then Hollington's supplied the whole of the British Army. I think that the industrial side of it, some of you may have seen on Look East, about Rowhedge, the shipbuilding, the culture of the America's Cup yachts. I mean, we've got so many things. Now, it does cast my mind a bit back to something, again, that both Bob and Kevin and I would be well aware of, was we used to have a thing called Culture 2020, but our main aims in that, lo and behold, going back about 2000 or 2002, were first sight in the stadium, and by God, did they cause some hassle and problems and whatever. But we did it. And that actually, the structure of that, of how 2020, you know, it was the magnificent Andrea who led that charge, then shoved off one way or another. I better be very careful on that. But it worked. And these are massive, major schemes. So I think that how it's structured, and I'm really pleased to hear that Karen's on it, because she's one bright lady. And equally, you're absolutely right that the oldest part of culture actually is Eastgates. You know, you go down by the mill, down by the river. Do you remember we used to have a magnificent medieval street called Culver Street years ago when I was a youngster? Got demolished, Kevin, didn't it? So I think that it needs to be looked at very, very carefully, and what does stand out, you know, and the fact that we have the oldest Roman walls. Well, were they put there to be a delight to the eye and a visitor attraction? No, they were there for a purpose. They were defensive. So we are kind of a citadel city, aren't we? We are actually one of the European fortified cities, together with what's the one that we twinned with in France, Avignon, and Imola. Imola's no, is it Imola one, or the one where that doctor got killed when a lump of masonry fell on him? Well, the Palio. Anyway, you know, the thing is that we have to be quite structured in how we do this. And Dorian brought up purely art and culture, and I think it's much more than that. And I'm, again, really pleased to hear about the cultural issues of things like farming and fishing and sailing. You know, I go all over Europe, have done business all over Europe, and the brown boats they talk about, the smacks and barges, there isn't anything else like it. So I think it needs to be kind of structured into, yes, the historic centre, wherever that may be. You know, where is that wonderful piece of dog walking grassland out at near the tip? Gosbecks, isn't it called? Yeah, I think so. Archaeological site, yes, and then the graves, isn't it? You know, so yeah, you know, there's so much that we have to define what is going to be attractive, because actually the back of all this is people. And if we make the facile assumption they all think like us, they don't. So that's why I'm going slightly against the trend and saying that actually they love these sealed knot reenactions. I was dragged to one by my grandson, you know, oh, God help us, what is it? It's amazing. These weird people all dressed up. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, should I? Really, a bit like the town guard, who are great, you know. That, to most people, and the ones you were talking about, on the commuter belt side of culture, that's what they want to see. It's an identity, really. It's a very fragile thing. How do you create an identity which brings in good and bad? You can't just say that this was a wonderful, benevolent squirearchy last 2000, because it wasn't. It was pretty damn rough. And I think actually you've got to highlight one against the other. So David, if you know, I can see that you are obviously listening. Like, why wouldn't you? It's rather more subtle in many ways than it might appear, as we've just spoken about it. So sorry to complicate the issue, Rory, but you know, I'm just sort of putting my thread in, and I shall look forward to it. The commemoration of the siege. But there we are. That'll do it.
Do you know, we're almost in a fortunate position of, we've got so much.
Well, that's the problem.
That is the problem. It's a good problem to have. But
I'm trying to get all the facts and stuff back to culture.
Councillor Tate.
I'm a little bit, how do you follow that now, I have to say. I had decided I was going to speak, and then you sort of said what I was going to say in a much more eloquent way than I could ever wish to. So really, it's about supporting Sir Bob's views with regard to diversity. I think when we think of diversity, we think of diversity of ethnicity and diversity of beliefs, but it is about diversity of interest as well, because I mean, everyone's touched on it now, but I think it does feel a bit art and culture heavy, and obviously that's not everybody's bag.
Thank you. Councillor Carman.
A question, Rory. A few years ago, we spent a chunk of money on advertising this town. And I do believe it went out on Sky, if my memory serves me right. So can I ask if we talk about comms all the time, communications, getting the message out. Can I ask if any consideration has got into producing a city TV ad that would target a whole lot more than just a few leaflets or Twitter adverts? So there's my question. Are we in the position, thought about, can we please, whatever regarding a TV promotion or radio? Thank you.
So David's been closer to the conversations than I have been. I'm sure, yes, in short, I know there's been lots of marketing materials and videos already developed through the bid and through our own comms team. I think I mentioned that are being shown in local cinemas, such like whether they can be adapted for TV through something like that. We will look at, if not, we will explore that opportunity. So absolutely.
Thank you. I'm about to call Councillor Fox to the table, but a quick question on the back of what Phil said. We did have a thing going where we were doing the train and hotel entertainment packages to bring people to Colchester. How do you know how that stands? Where we're going with that?
So I don't, I'll be honest, Chair, as I say, colleagues are leading on this piece of work, but I'll take that away and feedback. And as I say, we will have a more in-depth conversation with lots of detail, visuals in terms of the marketing. So you'll be able to see it and feel it, see it far better than I've been able to present tonight. So apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for indulging me. I had a really interesting discussion about heritage and how we commemorate the variety of history that there is in Colchester. And I think what's been insightful is the range of opinions and how you go about commemorating over 2,000 years of settlement here. I was struck because I represent Old Heath and the Hive, the discussion around industrial heritage and it not being seen to be commemorated in the way that it might be. But I'm all in favour of, I think, reflecting in particular that industrial heritage and the workers that built Colchester into the great place that it is today. But all over Old Heath and the Hive, there is commemoration of our industrial heritage. I think at Old Heath Rec, there's gates there that commemorate Paxman's. There's information boards that commemorate that too. I'm hopeful. It's a real shame that that final site of what was Paxman's in Port Lane is closing, but I'm hopeful that in any development that takes place there will be a further a commemoration of the history of that site. But all along the Hive, there is a trail that commemorates the port and everything that contributed to Colchester as well. So it's not that some of that doesn't exist, and I know that in pockets all over our great city, there are, in rural areas and in urban areas, there are these places that there is commemoration of our heritage. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to make it clear to promote all of that exists, because there are those places all over Colchester. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
A couple of very quick things from the conversation. Good debate, by the way. Thoroughly enjoying it. We should always talk about our city in such glowing terms. A comment around about the port, of course. The port, remember we had a port, it was very important, and we had a title called the Port Reeve. I reminded myself when I was reading the documents outside the council chamber only on Monday evening. I believe I'm right in saying that former councillor Chris Arnold was the last Port Reeve, because it went as a title here. Yeah. And I think, and I'll stand to be corrected because Sir Bob or John will tell me, is up in the Moot Hall, the Black Raven is the emblem of the Port Reeve. Why don't we just bring that title back? Because that's something because we've forgotten about it, and it will just get lost in the annals of reading something outside the chamber. Bring it back as a title. What does it mean? Nothing, but it's a title. It's a historic title. It was with this city for many, many centuries. Bring it back and make it a discussion type topic, and make a councillor, maybe one of the champions, the Port Reeve. There's no job involved in it, other than there's a historic memory of it, and it becomes part of the history, ongoing history. Whether Shrub End or Brigate, beautiful places they are of the historic city centre, I don't think people see them as that. And my point, of course, was around the branding, because the hard-nosed part of this is about our economy. So while it's great we're a city, let's actually take and do something with it and make it a place people really want to come to for all the things we've talked about. Let's really push it, because the economy will be at the heart of this. So while promoting our city is good, makes us feel good, let's not keep it to ourselves. There are millions of people out there who would love to come here. Let's attract them and find ways of attracting them as well.
Thank you. Rory, is there anything you'd like to come back with?
Just to thank the panel for your input. I absolutely take that away. We'll feed that into colleagues. So thank you.
Thank you. So what we have to do is make recommendations to Cabinet. I know that two key members of Cabinet are here and have heard everything we've got to say. Are there any key recommendations?
The one thing I meant to say, by the way, I haven't got a sense of timeline. So it's great doing all this consultation, but you don't end up having a fantastic consultation and nothing at the end of it. So I'm not suggesting we would have that, by the way, but just having a timeline, because we need to be clear with the public what to expect and when. Some great things coming up, but I haven't got it in my head what's happening when the official launch is, I still think we haven't talked about a permanent structure. I think we should have a permanent structure. There are some great things on the port, on the industry, all sorts of things we could have. Deciding what that could be, it could be more than one, but I think that needs to happen. So just getting a sense of that could be a recommendation that be clear about what the timeline is so we can sell it to the public and beyond.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. And I mean, you say it's coming back in March. We are going down the route and time does slip and pass very, very quickly, and we don't want to miss this opportunity. I've scribbled down, going back to what you said, Kevin, about public funding. And I think that is the way forward, because if you look at this building and all around Colchester, you've got donated by. And I think a lot of people would actually like to buy into this, and so that there is. So can we do a recommendation to Cabinet to investigate that? So anybody got any words to put that together? The other thing that's come out of this debate, I think, is the fact that we have so many strands, and we've got to consider all the different strands. By the strands, I mean like the engineering history, and I'm reading what's been here. Krista, would you like to?
I think it's essential that we get something back that is fairly fulsome at the March meeting. And I think Kevin's quite right. It's important that we have a timeline, because it's already been pointed out to us this evening that we're several months into knowing that we're going to have city status. And we're still talking about what we're going to do rather than showing clearly what we're intending to do. I think critical that we feed back to Cabinet that we need to have something before this panel in March that says this is what we're intending to do. Does it have legs as far as the panel is concerned? Is there anything that the panel sees is missing, or anything that the panel sees shouldn't be in there, as has been suggested this evening? Yeah.
If I can ask Rory, how soon, seriously, do you reckon this report is going to be ready prior to March? Oh, maybe we have an answer coming.
Need to remind the panel, what we said we would go out to do was to agree on a 4 year of celebration commemoration. And that has been done, very robustly discussed. It's true, a lot of it would happen, but the harnessing of it and the marketing, which is a point, that is well underway. So it's not that things haven't been done. That we said that during the course of that year, we would ensure that we focused on the economic, the legacy, in the widest sense, based upon a consultation. That consultation has been drafted. We're scoping some parts, but it's got to be done consultatively, thus starting to talk to people like the ambassadors and ensuring that they include those new to our patch or just beyond it, like Freeport East. I'm pleased to support them last night and their event up in town. So there are things away, but the two parameters were quickly get on a year celebration commemoration done, and get on scoping and give yourself time to do it well, because it has to be by engagement. Otherwise, it's that old thing of people like us or our officers, even clever of us, will set it out for us and we'll go, yeah, we'll go with that. The start, but I just asked for a little patience from us. We said what we would do, we're doing it. The board of boards, the coordination of some of the really key groups, that get into community, the voluntary sector, business in all its forms. They've started to meet and they're starting to engage. We meet again in a month's time. A subgroup of officers and counterparts in the private sector will be meeting during that month. They're going to address the key points we've touched on, which include how to market in the way that was touched on by you, Phil, up a whole level in a combined kind of way. So the maximum effect in a way that works for us all. And we've got to do some really tough things where people, not everybody wants to play in this kind of thing, which is stretch out to, I won't name all their names, those key anchor institutions or beyond who are interested but won't necessarily engage. That work's underway. By March, we'll have a richer picture. You will have that then, but I'd just like to sort of ask you to give us space and time. The intent is to use the year with the backdrop of celebration and commemoration, which gives us PR and marketing advantage to form up a view about how we're going to create a lasting legacy. That's the work of years, not the work of days, but we're on track on this from my perspective. It's very helpful for me as one of those chairs, chairing the chairs, to see that people are up for it, but we know how inertia can be developed. We don't want it bureaucratically. We're not getting it. You'll have some substance when you next come, including a forward timeline.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, thank you both for attending and listening firsthand to what the panel are saying. That's really appreciated. Does the panel want to make formal recommendations to Cabinet, or are they happy with Chris, you're indicating?
I would suggest, having heard from the leader, that we go with that.
So I think that's right. I think we should just note it though, and my question wasn't speed, it was just having a timeline, whatever that may be. And I think it's about promoting it to the public, so we expect the public, so we can promote it. So I'm not intending rushing anything, just having a clarification of what the timeline is what I think we need to publish.
And I think the public are already starting to ask what's happening, because they know that we've got the city status and they're intrigued and interested. So the sooner we get that out. And
so I won't drag this out any further, but just to reiterate the point that there is a timeline within the current Visit Colchester 2023 publication just landed. There's a pull-out as part of it, which already does contain events that are planned, and sort of to all members in the next few days, I imagine, but I know she's been away. So I think that will land, and that's very much for you and us all to promote to residents in Colchester.
I want to just thank the County Committee, for the invite for us. We know it's your evening, but we are really pleased to be able to come here and play a small part and to really sort of soak up your sense of this. Great anecdotes as well are always going to be thrown in with the membership that we have, but it is a help. I don't want to ever play back, Kevin, inappropriately the way that you and others talk to this. We do understand what's being said around the table here. Thank you.
thank you. So I think that concludes item 7. So we now move on to item 8, the emerging strategic plan and consultation. And I invite you to stay at the table, because I'm sure there'll be questions fired in your direction.
So I might start, if I may, Chair. So at the last panel meeting, I know colleagues were given an early citer of the kind of the emerging themes coming from a survey we'd recently undertaken with residents and members. And you'll know from that conversation there was still quite a lot to do for our team to analyse that data, particularly. There was quite a substantial amount of free text in there, Libby, that I know that you've been going through in some detail in recent weeks, to see if there were further themes emerging to those that we'd already shared with you. And I know panel were really keen also to get more detail on some of the demographic details, the level of responses from different areas, and kind of the statistical validity, I guess, of the data, etc. And I know panel did recommend that cabinet. That cabinet focused the importance on obtaining views from young people and residents who are digitally excluded. That was a clear recommendation being made to ensure that their voice, the perception was the voice was not adequately represented within the information that was presented last time. And again, I know we resolved to bring the final report back to this meeting. I think it cautioned at the time that that was going to be a real stretch. Being honest with you, unfortunately, it's not been possible to undertake more targeted consultation in the time frame we've had. The team, which is Libby and a colleague Tricia, already had the data from the consultation that had been open, still to churn through, to look at analysing that, and just we haven't been able to turn that report around in time for publication for this panel. It has landed, though, I'm pleased to say, thank you, Libby, yesterday afternoon, and I know I've not had an opportunity to look at it in any great detail, and I'm sure that's the case with Councillor King and Councillor Fox as well. It's quite a chunky, it's 54 odd pages, so quite a lot to digest. What we will absolutely do is share it with panel members so they can have sight of it. And I know Councillor King, Councillor Fox may want to say a few words on this item, Chair, just to emphasise that both members and residents will continue to have the opportunity to kind of have their say on the future of Colchester as the strategic plan develops, as we have priorities that develop, and importantly, when we get into the point of delivery. We've already heard from the previous item in terms of city status, what the intention is there, continued consultation, continued listening, and that will be widespread. So Libby, I think, is who's been looking at who's compiled the report, been looking at all of the responses. I think it's going to touch on a couple of the kind of additional themes that have emerged now that we've gone into the depths of things. And no doubt this will be of interest to members. There is quite a bit in there actually around communication and how residents feel that they're being heard or listened to. So that will be of no doubt interest to the panel, including specifically young people. So I won't steal your thunder, Libby. I'll pass over to you to give kind of a bit of an insight in what's been looked at since.
Okay, hello, thank you again for having me today. So I will go over just to reiterate everything that we went over on the 30th.
Libby, could you move the mic a bit
Yes, of course,
closer to
sorry.
you? Thank you.
Is that better? Yes. Hello, sorry about that. So to reiterate everything that myself and Tricia went over on the 30th of November in the initial kind of headliner meeting, all of that still stands. All of those headliners, they still stand. So there have been a few other emerging themes and headliners that and one of them, which a few times say, is the need for increased communication. I'll go over a few of those in a bit more detail. What in particular Colchester City Council is responsible for, and that very much appeared to be in relation to roads. The first sections on the survey said, you know, we are not responsible for roads or education in particular remits, but still people said roads, potholes, and so I think even though we use that as an opening sentence, it's still something that people just can't grasp. So a little bit more explanation or a bit more increased communication around that. Ensure staff understand what is in their remit, and if things aren't in their remit, ensure they're able to triage appropriately. Because residents mentioned giving up when they're sent from one place. They feel sometimes that they're sent from pillar to post and not really know where to go, and in the end they just give up. If staff or say that responsibility lies. Use the right method of communication. Facebook was mentioned as not always the favoured one. However, when we kind of tried to probe a bit more in the discussion groups, they didn't actually know what communication method they did want. They just know that sometimes that's what they don't like. Youth and the need to consult more with the youth and engage the youth a bit more. Ensure a full cycle of communication is adopted. So, just a start, middle and an end. For example, how we've used this consultation, a lot of people in the survey and in the discussion group said, how do I know that, what we've said today, you're actually going to listen or take any notice of? And a recognition of how much weight a resident opinion has. Again, coming back to the point I just said, there were quite a few comments in the survey that said things like, what's the point in saying anything, you're not going to listen anyway, which that's one person potentially out of 200,000 in the whole of Colchester. So maybe a little bit of communication explaining that we're listening, but your opinion isn't the majority opinion. I don't know, but something around, you know, how much weight of recognition, how much resident opinion has. So that's communication. A holistic approach. So this is a new approach. There's so many meetings, strategies, projects and consultations continually taking place at Colchester Council, and they would work really well if there's more of a holistic and joined up approach with the many different things that go on, and you know, oversight of all the projects and joining them up. When we asked, initially we asked everyone to prioritise the current priorities, and then after that we there's an open text box in the survey that asked people if they could say one thing, what their top priority would be. Obviously a lot of the current priorities were mentioned, but there were 2 new priorities that came in there, and that was the city centre, which we mentioned before, but also infrastructure including roads was mentioned by 21.8% of respondents, and in particular how current infrastructure can't keep up and doesn't keep up with the development of Colchester. So those, I will come back to some more themes, but just to touch on something that came up in the last panel meeting was investigating further opinions into the rural urban split and the difference in opinions. Obviously we didn't have the time or the resource to open up and do any more consultation and then analyse everything, but as you'll see when you manage to have a look at the report, we have what we've done is that we have tried to split, because we asked everyone this in the survey what wards they were part of. We've tried to do some analysis and splitting up the wards into rural and urban, and there was little or no difference in what we looked at. So although we potentially had less responses in some wards, when we looked at the split, there was little or no difference. So that's quite interesting. So I mentioned last time the high street and or the city centre, and so that was highlighted a number of times within the survey responses and discussion groups as a priority for residents. And they did mention a lot about a clean up of the area, and they described it as dirty and grubby, but it wasn't always actually related to it being clean, but it was more the appearance and how it sometimes appeared to be like broken and outdated. There were themes that people wanted Colchester to have its own identity, particularly when it was discussed in the focus groups. They spoke about Colchester as being unique, and that we had loads to celebrate, such as its history and things. And although yes, they felt like it really should have its own identity, true identity, but we could also learn from other cities that do it well. Consultation with knowledge. So it was mentioned that there were some other consultations that they'd seen that didn't always appear to be undertaken with awareness of the understanding of local issues or internal plans that happened. And the final one was the want and need for residents to be heard more and to talk and listen to them more. So whether it's through contact of general groups, and sometimes they feel and people said that they felt like they didn't want to leave a response because they wouldn't be listened to anyway. So what's the point? So thank you.
Thank you, Libby. Any questions so far? Councillor Bentley, go.
So very good.
And Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Excellent update. A little bit of a moan. So we haven't got a paper here, so I'm not quite sure what we're being asked to do other than perhaps note what's going on. So I just put that on the table because I think we should always have something where we can read in advance and come back with some thoughts. There is one thing. So I said it before. Consultation is very important, but there's a point where you've got to stop asking, stop doing. So we really need to move on to that. So I don't have a sense here again of. I might have missed it from the last meeting. I was at the last meeting, but I missed it. Where we are in terms of timeline. So we just need to have that reiterated. And that might have been something we could have had today. And then there's a bit of inclusion work going on. So as this city of ours expands, and I think particularly of the area we represent and the growing area of Stanway, frequently people are moving into the new homes and say to us they live in Stanway, not that they live in Colchester. Not all of them, but some of them have said that to me. I'm sure you've had the same thing as well, Leslie, in our particular case. Whereas if you do move to Prettygate or Shrub End, you say, I've moved to Colchester and I live in Prettygate or Shrub End. It's a changing dynamic. And I think we need to be mindful of that changing dynamic. So how do we get people who are moving in, who've come here from, all they know about Colchester is a marketing brochure of a house they bought in Stanway. That's all they know. We're getting to those folk to get that included into this, because that's how we get the inclusivity. So that's just a comment. But I would just say, perhaps in future, we could have something we could just look at, and perhaps today, a timeline might have been something. But that doesn't take away from an excellent update. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you. I think in response to Councillor Bentley's point there, this is just an update because we were anticipating having the published document, but obviously, as Rory has already indicated, it's not quite there yet, but we will have it shortly, and then we will be able to put the detail. We did look at some detail at the last meeting, Councillor Bentley, so we went through a lot of the detail of the initial draft of the report. I think the point that you are making that really is critical, though, is that we take the messages that come out of this consultation and we run with those, and we run with them as quickly and effectively as we possibly can, and show to the residents of Colchester that we do listen. We are a responsive local authority, and we do take account of their needs and wishes and desires, but we can't always deliver everything that everybody wants. We can't be everything to everybody. We know, I mean, I will know, and I think most city councillors will be aware that probably the largest number of complaints that any of them are about the hole in the pavement outside their door, or the pothole in the roads that they drive up and down every day. And I have to say, nothing to do with me. That's all Colchester's door, but that's another matter. I remember years ago when Colchester was responsible for, or had devolved responsibility, I should say, for highways, and maybe those days should return, Councillor Bentley.
Yeah, I think that I don't have a problem with that, but I wouldn't devolve just to a district council. I devolve on a wider basis. And I would say that the teams that fix the roads are based locally in this area, not Chelmsford.
On that note, I will go over to Councillor Coleman.
To just concrete a point, my dear Dad, if it was raining, it was the Poxy Council's fault. If it was a street light, a hedge, a bramble, it was the Poxy Council's fault. I don't believe too many people, and I'm putting words in their mouth here, have moved on from that. It is a global statement that it's the council's fault. We own all the housing in the town. We own the whole of the town. We own all the roads. It is the council. Changing that is a massive information comms job. Because as you said, we keep telling people it's not our job. It's their job. It's their Highways England. There are hundreds of agencies. But if I go back to my dad, it's not. It's the council's job. Now, how you change that and get that information out, who does what, is one heck of a job, I think.
Councillor Giles, I'm listening and I've got some comments to make.
Well, first of all, I think the point about what used to be, in fact, quite recently, was local service agreements. And I think that with the discussions we're having on devolution, then that might have legs, because it did work pretty well. I actually think it works as well as it can be now. With it's kind of historic, you know. Our roads are antiques. Well, the Romans, didn't they? And they haven't really had a lot done to them since.
Well,
they have. Yeah, I was making.
We have more traffic on them.
Yeah, slightly more traffic on them, and of course, you know, there are issues we've never really grasped, like the high street. We've never, you know, and it is a hell of a problem. But that apart, you know, there are sort of good hopes that we can perhaps make things a little more localized, but people do forget that we only get 12 pence in the pound on council tax. And yet we are still the damn council, you know, we're the ones who, even though we only get that amount. In a sense, I think that Kevin, you and I get away pretty lightly in terms of where the money's gone. But that's the way it is. That is the structure. But yeah, you know, and why not? It's worked pretty well. What I did find very successful, and again, I'm going to invoke the blessed Andrea. She actually paid people to come in. She did a random draw from the phone book or from whatever, from the electoral roll, and paid people 25 quid, come in, booked a room with George. So in other words, you didn't get the people with a gripe. Because on a lot of consultation, you will get people who come here just to a single issue that they're really peed off about, like potholes, you know. But on those, we really got some fascinating, if it was structured correctly and the questions were structured correctly, there was some really good data came out of it. Didn't cost that much, you know, 250 quid, you got 10 people there, but it's got to be done well. And that actually did work. So it might be, you know, worth considering again. But we'll be coming on to that to a degree with champions, as they could be linked into how do you're not just championing something, you're also digging deep to see what it is you're representing and what's the views of the people coming back to you. But I still think, you know, I'm quite hopeful that it would work quite well, I think. But, you know, you're absolutely right, is that most people haven't got a clue who runs what. Just is, you know, is my garden waste picked up this week, and you know, has the pothole been repaired? Well, I know it's not a good example at the moment, but it will do. And you know, I think that it's historic that people aren't that interested in the wider strategic issues, in a sense. A few people are, and like Dorian, you know, and quite right for him to do that. But you can't. You need to get the man, I think Tim says the man on Forest Row omnibus or whatever, is basically, they only want to know that things are working. What was it? Someone told me recently that Colchester is now the most miserable town in Britain. Well, you know, we've got to change that, haven't we? We have. And to do that, you know, it needs some good PR, basically, because I actually think it's a great city. I was going to say town, I can't say that, can I? So innovation, you know, being sort of quite adventurous in a sense, to try things if they, you know, because I'm not sure we are in the proper field from the 200,000 population or whatever it is now. We're getting sort of individual little grabs out of it. It's not necessarily exactly what we want. It's got to be sharper and brighter and more directed. So yeah, you know, I'm waffling away.
I love you waffling away, John. Always interesting. There's a couple of points I want to make. One is it's so easy to blame the council because it's big, it's anonymous. And one of the things that I do, and we have a fabulous ambassador who is in Stanway. When he pops up in Stanway, Rosa knows exactly who I'm going to say, and that's Phil from the Highways Rangers, Phil and his team. And yeah, he is a fabulous ambassador and people know him, and he is the face of the person or the people that cut back the hedges in no man's land, and they're very interested to see what he finds in the hedges. I mean, I think there was one that he cut back and he uncovered a complete toilet. There was another one where he found a Heineken can that was in 1995. So that showed that he cut back properly. He really did. As I said, he is loved in Stanway. And when he pops up in Stanway, he gets a cup of tea made for him. And that's not by me. So I think it's sometimes it's a case of making the council human. You know, again, in Stanway, some of our residents know who our wardens are, our neighbourhood wardens are. And they like it and they engage and they thank you. You get the emails where they come in and they say thank you. So that is just an observation of what I do and what seems to work. The other thing is it is so important when we ask people questions on whatever level that we feed back and we tell people what we've heard, because then that sometimes generates another load of questions, because what we've originally been told isn't quite spot on and there's more detail coming through. And I just wondered how we were feeding back, and could we feed back not just to the people that have engaged, but put something out so that the people who haven't engaged can see what we're doing and that we are listening and we are coming back to them. And then that might have a knock-on effect where they want to engage as well.
I can answer that because I had a brief discussion with comms yesterday, and we felt that we didn't want to go out too soon because we don't know what the strategic plan, and obviously this is probably more your remit. We obviously don't know exactly what the new strategic priority is going to be, but when we do know what they are, then we can hopefully use the report findings to say, you said this, we did that. But we don't want to go out too soon with anything in case the priorities don't mirror what the report's findings were.
Thank you, Councillor Tate.
Yeah, it's just in a previous life, I was a resident consultation manager, and I'm sure I'm teaching you to suck eggs, and you're probably far more up to date with it than I am. But I'm always conscious of not consultation for consultation's sake, and ensuring that responses received and any questions we ask, we are asking the right questions so that we can influence whatever they reply. If it's too broad, then and we can't actually do anything about it, then it's counterproductive. But yeah, so making sure that we are asking about things we can actually influence. And just a quick to Rosa, while we were talking about people being fantastic community members, I just wanted to give the heads up to Quinton, who's done something for me this week and has managed to solve a problem that apparently has been there for 4 years. So high five, Quinton, publicly there.
Councillor Bentley.
Well, just finally for me, so if I can just nudge it back towards the agenda and the emerging strategic plan and consultation, just some observations here as well on this. So, because we have these awful annual elections, which are coming up in 13 weeks, I think, from now. So we're going to end up having a strategic plan that a new leader or the current leader may come and say, well, I don't want to do any of that. I don't do that at all. So in local government, councillors do have to listen, but they have to lead. So if you keep asking people all the time what they want, you'll get so many different answers. Political leaders, I'm not saying you haven't done this, but political leaders have to come in and say, that is the plan, that is the strategy, conscious we have a coalition here, but that should still be happening, and this is what we want to deliver. Now, ideally, you should do that over 4 years. That's what I do with the county. I came in May 21 with a very different plan called Everyone's Essex. We are delivering that at the time with my colleagues at County Hall to deliver that. While we have, so one of the things I would say is, let's get rid of annual elections, because you can't deliver any strategic plan with annual elections. What you have is 6 months governing if you get the chance, and 6 months thinking, well, I've got to get re-elected. And I am seconding it because part of the strategic plan. No. Well, there's no report, is it? So I can speak. What do I like about the strategic plan? We had a report, but I could speak to it. But the point being, part of the strategy should be how we govern ourselves. And we're not discussing that. So we're discussing potholes, I've noticed, and other things. We should be discussing strategy. And every leader that comes in is a strong leader under this model, should have the ability to say, that's the strategy of my cabinet, the strategy of my ministry, that's what I want to deliver. And that's what we should be aiming for. And the way you achieve that is through 4-year electoral cycles. That is strategy.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thanks very much, Libby, for coming along again tonight. And I think having listened to the discussion the last time and the discussion tonight as well, what struck me was that listening doesn't just take place once a year or once every 4 years. I think we need to be in listening mode all the time. And also that, for instance, on something like 4-year elections, we have set up a group to look at that. So that is being looked at. But also, for instance, the last strategic plan was agreed cross-party, across the chamber. It was, and I think that the councillors delivered well on that too, despite some real challenges over recent years as well. I don't think that you necessarily have to have a set of elections and then a brand new strategic plan. I think that as much as revolution, and that it's important that they are also, you know, achievable and deliverable in what are going to be some, you know, difficult times ahead in terms of local government and the finances that are able us to deliver on behalf of the electorate. I think one of the things we also have coming, you know, up as well is a new residents panel that will help to, I think, really get an insight into what people are thinking, particularly on, you know, having a bit more of a deep dive into some of those issues that we'll be able to use that residents panel for. And I think it very much mirrors what you were suggesting, Councillor Jarvis, has happened in the past in terms of bringing people in on that fact. But I think having listened to, you know, what is in the survey, is that the broad themes that we've currently been working on are probably similar, will probably be what is similar in the future. Now, yeah, of course, there'll be some particular focus on issues, and I think really building on city status is perhaps one of those. But otherwise, I think it's one of the advantages of having the electoral system that we currently do is that we do listen to our electorate on that regular basis. And it appears to me that councillors in this authority, whether they're in cabinet, on policy panel, or across other committees, they really do know what residents want, and they've got a real clear sense of that. And I think that this authority has its priorities pretty clearly where people want them, whether it's on the environment, tackling the climate emergency, whether it's on heritage and culture, whether it's on, you know, an economy that's inclusive of everybody in Colchester. I think that we're pretty much there, and I think that as those priorities evolve into the new strategic plan, they'll very much mirror what has come forward in the survey today. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor King.
I know, Kevin, you don't want me to treat this like a gauntlet to pick up. So vote has been said well. I won't go into 4-year elections, but I do love it when we go off and then say it's kind of related to the core subject, because anything can be. Views on this are known well, so, but I'll see how the council as a whole. But I want to give you a few words about where the strategic plan is and the internal view. And I want to go back to the challenge, back to the subject of Libya and all the work that she's done and its relevance. So where we are now is here is several pages that will not look that different from where we were when, as for council, we said what is most important from the climate change on through the needs of our residents from housing onwards. And the reason for that is because they're widely supported, they're widely appropriate. We can all have a play with language. What was agreed before, in our view, and it'll have some test. And I think if we're a little further ahead of where we are, I would have wanted to share that with you because I'll be interested in the view. Maybe we'll do that offline. I just want to sort of say to you, the direction this council together has set together, differences ironed out, I think, by the fact that actually you and I have talked about this, Kevin, a lot, but the fact that actually what binds us is far more than what divides us, right? So the answer to the fair challenge about the tumult every sodding year, well, this last year we've had a couple of bonus by-elections, haven't we, to add to the mix if we were ever feeling the need for exercise around rain-swept parts of our great city and wanted to get to know places we didn't know so well. But the point I want to just make is we are in a mature place. The differences will be small, other than that we will be following the LGA's recommendation, which was to try to make a more of a conscious link between aspirations we can all sort of agree, do as much as we can about the current emergency, and then what actually we can do. So in that sense, a leader, strong or otherwise, with his cabinet as a team consulting, which is what we do across party as much as we're able, so we've got as much of a consensus as possible. shows maturity that the LGA said it saw in us here in Colchester, bless us, which mostly we do show like tonight. And then that can show itself in the detail that we should do. A little bit more out of us and make more visible to members what actually we're going to seek to do. So it's not just lumps of money to different parts of the council administration, but we have to work out how to do this and what level of detail is sensible, but rather more detail than we've done before. I think that will be a good challenge. And then year on year, if there are adjustments because needs change, well, then that's the place to go and do it. But the framework, I think, will be pretty close to where it was. But I just want to say to you, there is one big exception to what you and I would have seen from the last strategic plan. And that will be the circumstances we're in will require us to be much more mindful of the need to balance the books, to run efficient and effective and differently. In there is scope for devolution, in my view. And that's perhaps something we should make sure we make a reference to. But the reality is our circumstances are different. Our cloth has to be cut. But the broad approach of the last strategic plan still stands test. And I think it will find favour across the wider full council. That's certainly going to be my approach, colleagues, as you'd hope it would be. So here, back to the subject. Thank you, first of all, again. We need to take the challenge of saying, okay, we've done the consultation, framed appropriately, which was budget priorities, what matters most. What could be more appropriate of a framing for the questions and then for the answers that follow? The challenge for Adam and I and colleagues with officers is to say how much of that is appropriate to sort of go tag tick, or no. But we'll take that on so that we make your work meaningful. That will then help and influence the communications, and to those who care, reinforce the relationships that we have with our residents to show that we're serving them in the spirit of everyone's Essex, much of which I support. Mr. Bentley, sir. Right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Do you know, one of the comments I'd like to make is I really welcome the weight that this consultation has been given, because for me it's so important that our strategic plan and our direction is underpinned by the responses to the consultation, because we're going back to the council and it's part of the journey. I hate using phrases like that, but it's what makes us people, you know, because at the end of the day, we're here to represent the people to the council. So I really welcome the weight and the work has been done so far. The report will be going to Cabinet first. When will the panel be the report?
So shall I clarify a few points, because it's a fair challenge, Councillor Bentley, on lack of reports. What is the ask? So this was a piece of work that was underway to help inform the strategic plan, working to the timeline of the reporting to Cabinet. Obviously, we spotted an opportunity with this panel's interest in wanting to hear, you know, what the public participation and people's views on the future of Colchester. So we wanted to take the opportunity to give people the opportunity to come here, speak directly to members where they might not have had an opportunity to join certain focus groups. So that was very much the approach taken, for the panel to hear that directly and to hear some of the emerging themes, and to potentially then, on the basis of that, make some recommendations into Cabinet to help steer them a bit more based on maybe what they've heard. So hopefully you feel you've had an opportunity to do that somewhat from what you've heard already. I appreciate the actual report itself hasn't landed. I think we will circulate that, and we'll circulate that as soon as we can. I think there was an offer there, certainly from the leader, that offline, I appreciate tonight you might find it difficult to specify specific recommendations, but I think there was an open offer there to have a conversation offline if there's things in that report that can be flagged, and I know that Cabinet will give that due consideration ahead of the Cabinet meeting in January. And I think, you know, the leader and deputy leader have already articulated the fact that, you know, having priorities is one element, and beyond, you know, in terms of when we get into the delivery, there's equally so much more opportunity to continue to listen to our residents.
Thank you. The action required is we may make recommendations to Cabinet. I think Cabinet have heard everything that we said. I think when we get started, will it be the policy panel that gets sight of the report, or will that, it won't go out to all councillors yet? No, okay, so maybe we just need to have a chat amongst ourselves offline, and then any points, any blindingly obvious points, one of us, probably me, can turn up at cabinet and pass that on. So no recommendations, you've heard everything. Everybody agree with that? Cheers, thank you. Right, the next item, how are we doing for time? We've got half an hour before the 8 o'clock. So let's start with the climate change policy and welcome. Where am I going? I'm losing the will. Let's try with members champions. I like the sound of members champions.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it's, my voice you'll have to listen to again. So I know potential for member champions is something Councillor King has been quite keen for this panel to explore before, and I know it's come up actually in discussion in this group where panel members have expressed a view that there may be areas of council business that could be championed by a dedicated member. It's not my intention to go through the report in any detail. You will have read its content, hopefully. I think the purpose is for panel to debate the merits of having member champion roles. There is some information in the report that sets out approaches taken by other local authorities. And this council will, of course, have its own view. And of course, those examples of best practice, there's listed there examples of themes that might be championed in other places. They're there as ways of example only. But looking in what other areas have done, there is a common method in the approach taken, and that's where champion roles have been adopted. It's not just a question of there being a member who happens to be skilled or passionate about a particular subject matter. All examples, I think, that I've seen focus on things that are agreed as key priority areas for the council business, or where there are key groups that perhaps need their voice elevated, and perhaps where those areas might not already be the specific focus of a portfolio holder or a committee. And then there's that subsequent thought process around, okay, is there a member that might fit the bill in terms of appropriate skill set, passion, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe this isn't about creating an additional role or more work or a layer of governance for the sake of it. And I think we would certainly need to be careful if we were to go down this road, to be careful to avoid duplication of effort. My take on the intention of this is in simple terms, is that's about providing additional focused member capacity with the support of officers on the things the council identifies as important. So should panel consider there are merits to having member champions, the report does ask panel to consider, well, what areas might be appropriate, and I'm sure colleagues will have views on that. And equally, rather than starting from scratch, you will see in the report there is a proposed scope of a role and a proposed protocol, and that's been shared for your consideration. And again, this has been adapted from a number of different examples from other places. So lastly, I know Councillor King was keen that the panel considered their own role in this space too, indeed with or without self-standing champions. So that may well also be something that the panel would like to consider. Otherwise, I'll pass it over to members to debate the matter.
Thank you. Councillor Tate and then Councillor Pearson.
Sorry, that Councillor Smithson is. I've actually got his feedback for you. So Councillor Smithson advises he feels it's a good idea. However, we need to be careful that it doesn't become a cheerleading exercise for whatever the policy holder suggests the position should be. I would share that view. It has to be able to offer friendly challenge, otherwise it won't add any value. We need also to think about how to manage the inevitable political aspect of the role. If it is going to work, then it does need to be non-partisan and for the benefit of the entire city. And we need to ensure that members would refrain from politicising their subject area, and that applies to all parties. He also would like further information on how champions will report their work to the council. If it is reported to committee, there is a chance that members may not be informed. And he thinks that there should be some form of quarterly report from the champion to all members, and if need be, to the leader that would disseminate them all. He has a couple of ideas for areas, as you requested: physical health, open spaces and leisure, retail, how do we attract it to our urban centres? And finally, he has an area of interest that he would gladly volunteer for, so he was wondering how you would go about doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Pearson.
Thank you. I actually agree with some of the comments that councillor Smithson has suggested. In particular, that if we are going to go down the route of member champions, we need to ensure that they are as apolitical as possible. And I think that may be the difficulty that I have with this whole idea. I also have some other difficulties, and that is about duplicating the work of portfolio holders, and also putting additional pressures on portfolio holders to interact with a member champion, but also on officer resource to interact with a member champion. So I'm slightly concerned about those things. So I came here tonight thinking I was probably opposed to us trialing the role of member champions. When I looked again though at the list, I was thinking there is one there that stands out for me, that I don't think we don't really have a portfolio holder responsible for. We don't really have somebody championing, but it is a big part of this city and has been for a couple of centuries now, and that is the army. And one of the champions that is mentioned is the armed service veterans. So my suggestion to everybody around the table would be, if we are agreed that we trial a member champion, that I would suggest we trial a member champion with that one responsibility and see how that works for a year or so, and then come back and review it.
Thank you, councillor King.
Briefly, of interjections, I'm the Armed Forces champion. Which only goes to show, Chris, and I do understand that when you've read enough of my emails, you never bother to look at the bottom. Why should you? But actually, it is a good example, irrespective of who holds it. I hold it because of my past MOD and military involvement, family involvement has made it a natural place for me to understand them, and then to understand me a bit better. But no, sorry, it's a tease. But it does go to show also the limitations of being a champion. How widely is that known?
That's right. I was just thinking, I was just looking forward to seeing you champion yourself to yourself. Councillor Bentley, did you indicate?
I did, thank you. So by and large, this is a good idea, and it happens in many other councils across the country. And the reason for this is in the everyday humdrum bread and butter stuff that we do. There are certain elements which we all care about that get no airing anywhere at all. Because there isn't a chance to do it. And some of the lists you see there are absolutely true. They have them in many parts of the country. So I think we should pursue this, because it gives a chance for a councillor, and Sir Bob was right, we are all champions, but we tend to be champions for the areas we represent, as opposed to globally across the city, just by the very nature of what we do and how we're elected, and on what ticket we're elected on as well. So I think having across the city and across party champion is a very, very good idea. I would add some of this, if I may. So some of the things missing, I agree with all this on here, the ones that examples us where we should follow that. But I would put in there rural and coastal issues. I think that's hugely important, because the rural and coastal economy and the wider context, but certainly here in Colchester, is very different to urban areas. And I think that just needs to be recognised. Not better, not worse, but different. And I think that needs to be recognised. And indeed, of course, with home working now, more people are working from home, and many more of those people are in rural areas, which is good, but also brings extra demands on those rural areas which weren't there 2 or 3 years ago on services and that sort of thing. So I think that needs to be looked at. I'm pleased to see climate change on that. I know we're coming to talk about climate change very shortly, which I personally am very passionate about. But I would like to see something about travel and transportation on here as well. Have a real champion. And we're not all going to agree on this. I understand that. And we talk about it, don't we? And it comes up in various debates and people have different views. but I don't think there's a clear sense of what this city wants to do about the next 50 years. That's not a criticism, because I'm involved in that as well, of course. I just think that we need to have that. There needs to be a champion around that, start thinking about what it looks like, how we're going to get around, because what that then forces is people to start thinking about not just immediate travel, but plans for the future. What I am fairly confident about is no one's going to drive anyway because they won't get off their driveways. I'm fairly confident about that. So we've got to think about how we change that. So that then helps informs the budget in the future of where you put your money and where you invest things to do that. Not everyone's going to agree with you. It comes back to that leadership question. If you want to have lots of consultations and do what everyone wants, you'll end up doing nothing. Which is why my comments before, I'm slightly fearful of that. So you need to show leadership. And if people don't like it, they don't elect you again. But you need to show that leadership. So I think a champion helps that. And I do like what's written in the paper. It's a very good paper, by the way, which talks about having the ability to be a friendly critic to this. I think that's hugely important, which is why the cross-party bit. But I would just fully endorse what I think has been said, and certainly by Councillor Smithson, is we mustn't get into the venal politics that Coshley is so brilliantly good at around January to March, April time. Okay, so the champion must be the champion, and the champion must be respected all the way through the term of their office, not come election time pointing fingers, well, you said that. If we can all sign up to that, then I think this has a bright future, and I'd push it very hard.
Thank you. Councillor Law.
Thank you. I find the idea of member champions very appealing because I think they can increase engagement and sort of link in with community and voluntary sector and then wider communities, and that's very helpful. I just would have liked to have seen some greater depth in the paper really around what outputs would be and how we'd measure the value of the scheme. And so I think maybe the idea of perhaps piloting it just in one or two areas would be very helpful, because I'm just aware of the many challenges we face in terms of helping residents with cost of living, but also the opportunities around city status. And I just sometimes, you know, it's easy to say, that's a great idea, that's being done somewhere else, but doing, you know, fewer things well rather than trying to spread ourselves too thinly. So I'd really like to think as well, you see, about sort of how we're going to evaluate this scheme. And then that also leads on to thinking about how we're going to run the member champions, because what's going to be expected of people, and so that it's truly inclusive, because if people want to participate, for example, who work full time, it might be hard for them to attend as many meetings or engagement events and meet with people. So it's how we plan that, because again, then how can we evaluate things? Some people may be able to attend meetings to use it as a, you know, quantitative tick box, they've done X, Y, and Z, or look at the qualitative value. So as I say, my suggestion, I'd echo Chris about sort of around, you know, what areas to focus on. And I think it would be good to have a really good think. That would give us time as well over the course of a year, if that worked, to really drill down and think about the areas that we wanted to focus on if we rolled this out more widely. You know, I've just got a bit of a personal issue, what was working in the sector supporting older people. I think that has great value, but I would say that. But as I say, I think it could be valuable in terms of engagement, but let's start and build this up sustainably. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Phil, Councillor Coleman.
Thanks. So Bob started this evening by saying, why have a member champion? Why not? Why would you not want to ask the expert? Leave the politics at the door, and the expert champions, promotes, pushes. I'm not talking about being a bonnet. I'm talking somebody with 40, 50 years experience. That's the expert you're going to. They will be the critical friend. They will challenge, but they will also make sure that fact comes forward. And to go back to why would we have one? Because there's a huge amount of knowledge and understanding in someone's head. You have no idea about my 46 years in sport. You have no idea about my 46 years getting kids to play sport, fitness, health, leisure. I have 46 years. Does anybody else? Don't ask me, you don't find out. That's why you need a champion. knowledge and understanding of a key area. Because with the greatest respect to Cabinet, they've not played sport, taught sport, delivered sport, championed sport for 46 years. That's why we have a champion.
I was just going to say, sounds like you're volunteering there, Phil. I remember.
Can I
we
also
did
add,
have
sorry,
champions.
Chair,
Go
I've got one other point. It must be a two-way thing. Officers come to me, officers come to you for your knowledge and understanding. We can't be, can I have a meeting? If you've got something, you come to the champion. It has to be a two-way thing. It can't be all one way. Thanks.
That's what I was going to say, Phil. I can remember when we had champions before, and they were, I mean, cycle champion. And Teresa was also a cycling champion. We had youth champions. I was one, as was Sue. So, you know, it sort of fell by the wayside because it wasn't not supported. It was supported, but for example, with cycle champions, there might have been a press release gone out, but nothing was said to the cycle champion until they read it in the Gazette. So, you know, again, it's so important that if we do trial it, which I think we're getting the feeling for, that it is embedded. And you're right, Phil, things need to be run past the champion. The other thought that came to me is the portfolio holders. We don't want to duplicate, but again, if we trial this and we do decide to go ahead with it, it's going to be embedded into our culture. You know, this is how we do things. So we've got to think about not this next 6 months, next year, but the next 5 years and how it's going to work over the next 5 years. There was something else. Oh, I know. I mean, I unofficially have been doing animal welfare championing because I have gone through the route. You know, people say about fireworks and the distress and upset it causes to not only pets but livestock. And you know, I kept popping up at various committees and hello, I'm back again about fireworks. You know, what can we do? And a few years ago, we did 2 huge education events of Bark in the Park. I attended and absolutely loved by people. We did that 0 budget. So, you know, I've been championing unofficially animal welfare. So I think it's a good idea to go forward. That's my personal view. Is that the view of the panel? Yeah. So really, we just need to make a recommendation. I'm looking at you, Chris. Is there any other questions? Anybody want to come back on anything?
We've got recommendations in front of us, Chair, haven't we? So it's whether we,
Thank you. I'm trying
whether we,
to read and it gets,
whether we
gets somewhat
accept those
challenging.
in full or we want to
Okay, yes,
tweak
thank
them.
you. So,
So
right, 2-1,
We've
we've
done,
debated that.
Yeah.
And we support that.
then
So the next
2.2
bit is 2.2. which-
recommend areas of
yes.
council business. And
Sorry, say that again.
yeah, I'm still on, Kevin. So you can't come on yet. So it's recommend areas of council business that would benefit from adopting a member champion. And I know I said that we and don't know whether that was getting support from around the table. But if so, that would be my suggestion. And then we can look at the areas. So I don't know whether you just want to check with everybody, whether we pilot 1 or 2 areas.
That was going to say that's the next thing for the panel to decide which areas do we want to look at. Yeah, councillor.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't realise. I thought you were nodding at me to speak. So I think one of your suggestions was Councillor Pearson, Army Armed Forces, and of course we have one. So that's tick done. There's any others. I certainly put 2 forward, which is rural and coastal issues and travel or transportation, however you want to put it. I think there are 2 areas we could look at. Now, there are 2. I think what was put forward are the other recommendations. I think they can be followed up. Young people, older people, climate change. So we have a climate change policy about to discuss. There's no harm in having in Essex whoever's are who's always to champion that across not at Colchester but around the surrounding areas and other places. So I think we should. My view would be add in those we wish to add in, hand it back to the cabinet who will make the final decision on this. The only thing I was going to mention, by the way, in this, it does suggest that it goes to cabinet, the leader makes a suggestion and it goes to full council. I don't think you need the full council bit with a strong leader. The strong leader can appoint these people. It just cuts out a level of, time and waiting. The leader can just do it. And I think we should just say the leader should be able to do it.
Councillor Coleman.
There are 51 members. How do you know what skills, knowledge and understanding they've got without asking 51 members? Because they may well come up with the list because they will be the champions.
So are we putting the cart before the horse? Should we be finding out what particular strengths our residents have? And David is
No.
indicating.
I think if you're up for this, and I should say, Phil knows, because he and I had several pints and several long conversations around this. It started with that, didn't it, Phil? That we want, between us all, don't we, to tap into the very best, the talents and the abilities, and also the passion, if they've got the time. It's not just about knowledge, it's about can you find and make the space to apply that passion and knowledge. And it's got to be collaborative. It's got to work with the cabinet member. I think if you as a committee were to say, you're up for this, which is what we hear clearly, and you've got some examples for us to go and look at, we'll take it forward in the spirit of this conversation. And that would have to be opening it up to the members, because we'll be saying to them what we've agreed, and it'll be inviting them. We'll do this in a genuinely open way against the starter point of the kinds of roles that are being discussed, to see who is up for it. This one has some organic life, or it won't. I think it will have some life. There will be some people who will be interested. My personal wish is I hope there'll be people cross-party. Yeah. So, you'll have a current opposition member, the way politics goes in Colchester, dealing with a coalition portfolio holder, and the two getting on and finding a way within some elastic frameworks, so depending upon their time and their character and the capability. So I don't think we need to be too prescriptive. You took my start and made it a much better document. Thank you, Rory. I think all here we have to do is agree to the
I'd like to say that's a brilliant document, by the way, Rory. It's worded so well, covered absolutely everything.
So again, I'm not convinced we need to make any recommendations. Because, sorry, Lee.
It's okay, I just wanted to clarify that, because obviously we're going to give a list of ones back to the leader. I just wanted to make sure that Ross, someone entirely different, the three that Reece had suggested were noted, please, Richard, or Owen. Yes, of course, will do. Yeah.
Excellent. Councillor Fox, have you something to add?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think it's been really insightful, the discussion this evening, and it's clear that there are people across the council that, probably have got, something more to offer than we're currently perhaps getting out of them. I think we do need to be really careful about, an overly exhaustive list of champions. We could end up with 52 champions and 51 councillors to fit all the roles. For example, on climate change, we have a cabinet member that has overall responsibility for environment stability. I don't know whether that is one a champion over and above what is already a cabinet role. But I think Councillor Coleman particularly has, a whole range of skills around sport and young people that, we probably need to tap into more than we already are. I think the idea of trying this with one or two roles is probably the right way to go, because what I would be mindful of is, I think, let's say 8 or 10, and then that just, we're already, a key list of council priorities, limited resources in order to deliver them, officers that, work really hard to deliver against those priorities, and then us just adding a whole load of additional workload on top of it. So I think that the discussion has really, helped, I think, for me to crystallise where probably need to go from here in terms of, let's see, what a trial of champions might do, and then how we might evolve over time. Mr. Chair.
Fabulous. I mean, the thing is, it's got to go right across the council, and it's not just the lead officer who relates to that, whatever the subject's going to be. It's got to have comms on board. So comms come to the champion to A, let them know something's happening, and B, get a good quote. And I'm turning off the button, forgetting that I'm the chair. So really, I was going to say we've got rural and coastal transportation. How do you see the transportation champion going? Because a lot of the transportation matters come from county.
If you believe we're all separate organisations working silos, yes, that's true, but we don't do that at the county. We certainly don't do that in Colchester and the county. We work together, but you need someone to champion it, and better that's a local person here and thinking for the next 50 years, not the next 12 months.
Okay, Rory.
So thank you for the feedback this evening, panel. And I think possibly if I've taken that away, and I know Councillor Fox and Councillor King have, so we'll have a conversation based on what's taken place today. I would add, I think transport is an element of an existing portfolio. I know we've changed the name slightly, but I know it's an element of one of our portfolio holders' remits at the moment, so we'll give that some consideration. But I know Councillor King and Councillor Fox and Cabinet will have a view, perhaps based on the conversation tonight, what areas we might want to pilot. So it's been a really positive conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I love a positive conversation, and obviously all this discussion will be minuted, so it's all there. So I'm very happy to close that item if everybody's in agreement. Thank you. And it's 8 o'clock. So what I suggest, what good timing, what I suggest is we have a 7-minute break. 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Yeah, thank you. Lucky number. Hello and welcome back from our short break. We now move on to item 10, climate change policy. Ben, would you like to present?
Yep, so I'm just going to bring some slides up on the screen, or Aaron's going to do it for me. Okay, right. So this set of slides report has been brought after a previous recommendation at the policy panel to look at whether we should have a climate change policy at the council. And so if we go to the next slide, the structure of the slides is to talk about, remind members about what is our climate emergency declaration, what are the key sort of targets we've set in that, and really how from oh, we go back, we're back. Oh, we work. Okay. Right, we're back. Okay, yeah. So going on from the declaration, I think we want to make clear that what we're trying to do at the council is to mainstream considerations of climate change and the environment within existing policies and ways of working. And that's really what we're going on to talk about. So we'll give a few examples there, talk specifically about a few things, namely our climate emergency action plan, talk about our emissions reporting, the work of sort of internal monitoring officers, but also members through the Environment and Sustainability Panel, and then talk about how our performance is also being reviewed externally. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, that's one too many. One forward. Okay, yeah, so Declaration of the Climate Emergency, 17th of July 2019. Amongst other things, we said that we wanted to reach net zero operational emissions by 2030. Obviously, that had an emissions focus, but the council obviously wants to do more than that on a wider environmental scale, looking at things beyond carbon, as it says on there, about waste, air quality, biodiversity. And what we've really, as I said, we've tried to embed it within council culture. It's probably the key word, really. So we've got tackling the climate emergency as a key theme within the current strategic plan. We've got a climate emergency action plan, which we'll talk a little bit about later on. And we've also embedded it within committee reports and project assessments as well, where they have to consider the climate emergency within those decisions. And then also beyond the council, so working with other groups, such as Essex County Council, the Climate Anchors Working Group, which I'll talk about a bit later, as well as Colchester Borough Homes and Amphora. So go to the next slide. Yeah, so in terms of how we're embedding it at City Council, all projects now have to complete an environmental assessment at the sort of project initiation stage. When they're thinking about what their project is about, they have to think about what are the environmental impacts, both positive and negative of that, and think about ways that they can mitigate them. And that's something that wasn't in place before the declaration. In a similar vein, on committee reports, there is an environmental and sustainability implications section of every committee report. So staff should be considering the environmental impacts of decisions that they're putting forward in their reports. Whether or not that is done to the right standard is another question, but it's there. Going on to sort of staff working with, got funding, we've had funding to create a low carbon office at Rowan House. Many people are aware of the heat pump and the insulation and LED lighting that have gone in there. Right, yeah. So that'll be a great space for when staff go back, that they'll be working in an efficient environment alongside working from home. And also we've got a good staff travel plan, which encourages sustainable travel to work, discounts on public transport, support with cycling and walking and things like that. Digital by default, I think that's pretty standard. Reducing waste is a key environmental angle there. Environmental awareness training for staff is something that we're working on at the moment, so that all staff, when they begin at the council, understand what tackling the climate emergency sort of means, what is climate change, why it's important for the council and what they can do within their work and personal lives to make a difference. We've got some SPDs or supplementary planning documents that the planning team are currently writing up on several environmental topics that are named on the screen: sustainable travel, climate change and biodiversity, which will give outline to developers what we expect in terms of tackling sort of climate change in the wider sort of Colchester area. And we're also right in the process at the moment of trying to recruit an energy manager to cut bills across council services. Their role will be both a behaviour change role, so to help staff understand how they can save energy within the council's corporate buildings, as well as sort of larger scale measures to cut bills and emissions. Next slide. And then how we're trying to mainstream it with other partners. So Essex County Council, obviously a key partner. One of the key areas has been brought up several times in this meeting is around transport. Colchester's received funding for active travel through the Active Travel Fund, one of the biggest allocations, I think, in Essex, which has been really helpful, and the team worked really closely with Essex on the behaviour change work that the team do around walking and cycling and facilitating that. Also hosted, coming out of the Essex Climate Action Commission, is the Climate Action Anchor Institutions Working Group, which is a group of several bodies, including the council, education institutions, health, to come up with actions to tackle climate change on a wide level. And that's sort of trying to, again, embed climate change into other things. So that one of the key things they've done is looked at fuel poverty training for frontline workers. So looking at tackling that climate, but also cost of living. Colchester Borough Homes, another one. Within all new council houses being built, they're being built to Future Home Standard 2025, something that we've said that they should do, which means building to high efficiency standards with low carbon heating in place. And we've also worked to discuss ways that Colchester Borough Homes can phase out the use of glyphosate on spaces at which they own, which is an approach the council has done, and we've supported them with that. And for Energies, one of the obviously council's energy company, got big projects on the heat network and solar park, and a couple of other significant projects there that I just thought worth mentioning in terms of how they've brought about and worked with other partners to try and spread messages around the environment. So air quality, we've had a big push around no idling and behaviour change that has engaged with lots of schools and businesses and community groups to try and take that forward. Which has resulted in improved air quality. We're noting that now. And also through the Woodland and Biodiversity Project, that's very much a project that is driven by community engagement and trying to get lots of people involved in the greening of the borough. Go to the next slide. So one of the key ways I think this is all wrapped up at the council is through our Climate Emergency Action Plan, which has 9 different themes, as you can see on the slide. Some of which are very sort of internally council focused, but some majority are also outside the borough. And this is definitely just not put together by myself. I've coordinated it, but it's very much populated by lots of staff across the council who put in their own ideas. So I think it's really all staff are thinking about this and how they really work. Next slide. This I just wanted to go on to because obviously the main part of our sort of declaration and sort of monitoring of where we're going, where a policy might lead into a key target is obviously our emissions target. So I wanted to remind councillors of where the council's emissions come from. So as displayed on the slides, gas and electricity consumption from council buildings, fuel consumption from fleet, as well as staff commuting and business travel, and emissions involved in the treatment and distribution of waste that we consume and waste production from our buildings. Next slide. So in terms of the most recent financial year that we've got data for, this sort of shows our emissions. So the big sections are from sort of gas and electricity, as you would expect. Noted in here, a recent change also, again, another way to try and get staff thinking about tackling climate change sort of within their own home is measuring emissions from working from home, which obviously is a key shift that the council's done. We've done some estimates to try and work out what that contribution is to the council's footprint and considering that within our targets. Next slide. So there's been some context about what progress we've made since that declaration. There's been a 10.1% reduction in emissions since declaring the climate emergency, which is of course positive. But there's still lots more we can do, as you can see on the next slide. It shows where we're sort of trying to head towards 2030. We did some work with the Carbon Trust to project the council's emissions out to 2030 based on some planned projects that we already had in place. So this includes considering the impact of the decarbonisation of Rowan House, the fleet decarbonisation, and also the decarbonisation of 2 of the council's or Colchester Borough Homes council sort of owned sheltered housing stock. As within the council's emission footprint, we do consider emissions from the communal heating and lighting of these buildings. Is it something we have greater control over? So you can see, obviously, by 2030, there's still a 2,617 tonnes gap to target between that and zero that we still need to try and cut down. And that's something that we are looking at doing right now. We've been doing some commissioning some surveys, building surveys, to identify more ways that we can reduce emissions within our own buildings. But we do know that there will obviously be a need for some form of offsetting to get that down to zero. Next slide. So yeah, to touch on the internal monitoring and the sort of way that we do that. So we have a climate opportunities working group, which is a cross-service working group, which meets to share ideas about what people are doing to tackle climate change within different service areas, different projects, and sort of as a sort of a friendly kind of forum for people to pose things and get advice. And there's another way, again, that people from a variety of different service areas, whether that be museums to the green team, to sort of share advice, and it's just another way to sort of mainstream it, I think. We've also got our project board, which sits above that, which is made up of senior staff, and they're predominantly advising on key decision making, items which may need to go to Environment and Sustainability Panel. And then, of course, namely, we've got the Environment and Sustainability Panel, which is a cross-party panel, which meets sort of every 2 months, and they have the opportunity to critique what we're doing in terms of tackling climate action. They receive regular updates on how we're doing that. And I think it's already a key body which guides a lot of the work that we do. And finally, we're not just doing this sort of monitoring and reporting internally. We've also got an external body called Climate Emergency UK, who are a not-for-profit who set up when a lot of organisations were declaring climate emergencies to be sort of critical friend and to critique basically at what councils are doing on climate action and how they could do it better to give advice. Last year, they rated all UK council climate emergency action plans and published that with advice on ways that they could improve. We've got a score, which is mentioned on the screen, of 52%, which is above the score of an average district. And we took upon their advice into ways we can improve our climate emergency action plan, which we are publishing next week. And they are then going forward this year to actually be rating all UK council climate action taken between January 2019 and March 2023 to really go into that depths of, right, people have done plans, but have they done the action to rate that? And that's a different level of critique. And scores will be published on that in autumn of 2023. So I think they're a really important body, actually, that keep us accountable to what we're doing and can also share advice on things that we could do better. So in summary, I say the reason I put those slides together is to try and really show how we're mainstreaming a lot of the work that we already do, and the reason why that even without this climate change policy, that we don't have one at the moment, we've already managed to mainstream it. And I think we already do that quite well, given the sort of the strength that the declaration brought. It made sort of staff have to consider it a lot more, and we can push that forward, maybe without the need for policy, but happy to take comments on that.
Thank you, Ben. Right, Councillor Tate, you are first to indicate.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to give you the feedback from Councillor Smithson. he has advised, he feels that any climate change policy must emphasise that the council's response to climate change is proportionate to the benefits that it brings, and that climate change must not be allowed to detract from residents' well-being. And by that, he means there is no point as doing something which might be considered I'm trying to think of a different word than the one I've got here, like banning the use of fossil fuels in its operation if the alternative energy sources are more expensive or don't provide the same level of light or heat or things like that. So we need to take that into consideration. And he also wants to be clear on the distinction between climate change and sustainability, being two different topics within the same arena. It's possible to live more sustainability without affecting climate change for better or worse, and vice versa. It is the same as the conflation of vehicular pollution. He could have used easier words for me. Vehicular pollution and congestion. Basically, 100 electric cars will produce the same congestion as 100 petrol cars. They just don't pollute the atmosphere while they do it. So his point is that any policy should therefore clearly differentiate between the actions we will take to be sustainable and those designed to support climate change. That's Councillor Smithson's view. My view, however, is that I am wholly supportive of, you know, the way years ago, a long time ago, when we had to write committee reports and we started to talk about equality and diversity, and then it just became second nature. And it was added into, it was considered in every review or policy that we wrote. I'm more supportive of that for the climate emergency, that we consider it in everything we do as opposed to a standalone. So basically, I'm supporting what Ben is suggesting. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ben. Lots of interesting and informative information in your report. I'd appreciate a copy of the slides, please. And I think other members probably would as well. A few questions and a few points. Very positive that we've had a 10.1% reduction in emissions across or what's controllable by the local authority since we made the declaration. Slightly concerning though when I saw the graph that we are only 2/3 towards our target of being having zero emissions by 2030. The remaining 7 years to 20. You mentioned SPDs. I was just interested in whether or not implementation date for those, because I know, having sat on the planning committee on and off, I've always been concerned that we have more environmentally friendly SPDs. You talked about having something for all new staff, our climate policy, and the fact that it runs through everything. Just wonder whether we're doing the same thing for new councillors when they have their induction programme. I'd be interested to know what specific work we're doing with our largest local authority, Essex County Council. And there was some reference in there to active travel fund. I'm quite sure what that is. Keen to know what that is, and I'm sure you're keen to elucidate on the joint activity between the two authorities. There was something around our powers to control emissions. Now, I remember being on the scrutiny panel in the first year I was elected as 14 to 15. And somebody came and spoke to us then about powers that we have as a local authority to actually restrict emission or emitting vehicles in the city centre. And I just wonder whether those have been considered and where we're at with that, if they are. We have a no idling policy in the city centre, yet as far as I'm aware, it still hasn't been policed. So we're not doing anything to enforce the no idling policy. So I'd like to know what, if anything, we're likely to do about that. Really good news that we score 52 against the district's average of 43. So I'd be interested to know at a future meeting how we're achieving that, but no doubt you're reporting that back to the environmental policy panel. So I'll look through their documents if that's the case. And I know your report suggests that we don't need a climate change policy. I think we do, even if it's just a one-line statement that this authority is committed to doing everything in its power to meet its target by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that and thank you very much. I'm also there's such a great wealth of information that's gathered about sort of progress and activities, how that can be translated into something that our residents can understand in communications, because something I think I felt concerned about with consultation, some people's comments about sort of, well, people just have to realise we just want sort of more cars on roads and we have to sort of deal with it. And I appreciate that people need to have transport at times, but just if we can communicate the importance of active travel, the difficulty we're facing with sort of climate change and why we need to sort of take the steps we're doing, because I'm so conscious we need to bring people with us and not feel the sort of we're fighting against them. And I think communication is key, but it can be so difficult with complex things. That's the problem. Sometimes simple sound bites, but but they don't always have the substance. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got no other indicators wishing to speak. Oh, Councillor Bentley, sorry, I missed you.
No, don't worry, perfectly okay. So you're absolutely in my territory here, and Ben, I thought that was a first-class presentation. You've done is absolutely outstanding. And county colleagues around said, well, no, we made this very much a core of everyone's Essex, climate change, and as leader, I appointed a climate change czar champion, but I called them czar because that's a good word, I think. Now, one of the things you could do in all of this, in using a champion as opposed to the cabinet member, because technically I'm the cabinet member and the czar is the champion, is that every cabinet member decision or action by this council goes through the officers and the climate change champion to make sure nothing we are doing is detrimental to the environment. No decision we take is detrimental to the environment. That happens at county. I think we could do that here quite easily. Now, sometimes there's challenges. And sometimes you'll get back, well, we have to do this, but there's always ways of finding a way around doing it. Do we make a commitment as an authority that we will take no decision that has a detrimental effect to the current climate? Then I think that's a long way to achieving what we want to do. And I would strongly urge that we would either recommend or certainly let's take it forward. There is a huge issue around this, of course, about how you encourage people not to use cars if there's no proper alternative. So this is the active travel that we talked about as well. On this particular element, because highways authorities, in this case Essex, were asked to apply, we applied for the money for active travel. But we did that, as you do everything else, in absolute openness and working together with our district colleagues. And as a result of that, Colchester was given the largest share of the money. It was given to Essex, but we passported that very quickly. And I was coming at the time for highways, and we set up the active travel groups, of which Councillor King was on and made a huge contribution to that, as was Councillor Lissamore and others as well. And we've had to, negotiate around that because it's not easy for everyone to understand, and people are used to using their cars. And I absolutely understand that. We are never here to dictate or tell, we're here to educate and inform. That's our job to do this, and persuade as well. And in that comment, I would say it is not the county council or the city council's responsibility to solve climate change. It is every single citizen's responsibility to solve climate change. The issue we've got is they don't quite know how to do it. A survey we did recently told us, and you'll probably be part of this, Ben, you'll know, they will tell you that the vast majority of residents in Essex, that will be Colchester too, are concerned about climate change. But they don't know what to do. And it's just amazing how one simple action, and I debated this in our cabinet the other day, how one simple action can start to change the course of things. Now, I made a conscious decision, because there's no point me talking about this if I don't practice myself, that where I Whenever possibly can, I use the bus and I use the train to travel in and around Essex or beyond. I can't always do it, so I don't say you have to ban cars, absolutely not, you can't, but where you can, one simple action. One of my cabinet members said, well, I don't think I'm really doing very much because 5 days a week I have to use my car for family reasons, but one day a week we all walk to school. That's a change. That's an absolute change, a positive change. If everyone did that one positive thing, you make a global change. The other challenge we will get is, of course, this country is a very small country compared to other larger industrial countries. One thinks of China, India, America. They're reducing far more carbon than we are. What does it matter if we do this? Well, that's not a reason not to do it. We absolutely have to bite the bullet. We show leadership in all of this. So I'm looking at you. We have to show leadership in all of this because I firmly believe that we are the last generation of politicians and the last generation of people that have it won't happen and it'll be too late. I don't say that in a preachy way. I just say it in all the information I have read, and I present this view from evidence I've read, not through just a sort of a rant or a personal belief. It's through evidence I've read, or there is a personal belief too. I'm hugely supportive of the collaborative way we're working, and you all know Sam Kennedy, and I'm sure you work very closely with them. I'm absolutely sure, because I know your name actually through them rather than actually coming to the City Council. So I know, Ben, the amount of work you're doing, which is huge. But we must make sure there's no boundaries. There's not just, that's culture stuff, this is Essex. We have to engage with all of our colleagues around this, because climate isn't just siloed into a local government restricted boundary. I know we all know that, but we're going to really start practicing that. And we all become champions in this as well. It's so hugely important. So I think there's several things we need to have. We absolutely have to have a policy. We absolutely have a policy, because that's your guide in all of this to make sure you're delivering what you said you're going to do. Hugely encouraged since the climate change emergency was voted through, we've made those reductions, but we're not on target. We collectively are not on target for that. So we have to have distinctions what it means. Now, the ultimate is of course 2050, but we want to do it sooner than that. So I think we need to clarify, do we mean 2030 for the council estate, what we are doing, or for the whole of the city? Because the whole of the city almost becomes an impossible target to do. So let's hone that down, what that means, and then show leadership in how we do that. And great things have happened in this council and in this city, certainly with CBH and the solar panels, absolutely brilliant. Solar Together, which you'll be aware of, which we're promoting through the county for all of us as well, to get residents to get lower costs in their solar panels. This is hugely important. So I think this is a major step in the right direction. I'm hugely encouraged by this. Ben, you've done the most enormous amount of work, and we should all be grateful for that, because I'll just finish what I said a moment ago. We are the last generation to do something about this, and I feel culture is on a firm footing. So well done.
I can see nobody indicating now. Going back to, I think it was you said, Chris, about saying about people not sure what they can do. And I mean, one of the small things is the no idling policy. And I just wondered how are we policing that? How are we getting the message out that that is a simple thing? What have I said, Councillor Fox, that you're smiling at me in such a sweet way? No, but I just wondered seriously, how we're getting the message out about the no idling policy, because I mean, it happens when people are queuing at any drive-through, and also it happens at school run times where people arrive, sit there with the engines ticking over, and that is a really small point. And if people understood that either don't get up to the school too early and so you sit there and freeze, or you know what they're doing by keeping their engines idling. Have we got the resources to do some more work there, David? You sort of like
No, sorry, we're having a sidebar about this. This wasn't looked at. I won't give where I think it is, because I know we were looking at this and whether it was, I think it's more a case of when one might and then how apply a potential to enforce. That was where the last time I was piped into this conversation. I'm actually up on the hard side on this, but I'm all up for doing it if you can in a collegiate way where you educate people rather than you give them a kick. You know, it's right, it could be better to do that. But look, the officers will have a view on this. If not, we can express what I understand.
you, councillor Giles.
Well, I was actually rather pleased to hear that because you can lead a horse to water, and we've got to be very careful that we don't go so gung ho to this that we make it actually unpleasant for people to do. I remember my colleagues at County, Chris Pond, you know, really simple thing he said, which is keep your car. None of us don't change every 3 years. Massive amount of environmental energy going into these things. Keep the damn thing. So I've taken that to heart. 17 years old. And you do little things like I've built a civ house and I've put 3 acres of land down to a wildflower meadow. They're just fine. You do those things. But there is an innate sort of conservatism in a very small c, I mean, in how people are susceptible to change. I can see actually that the sales of electric vehicles are dropping. There's an awful lot of problems with them. And one thing interesting that we could do supplementary SPDs is that we don't seem to be putting that many street charging points in. We're encouraging everyone to go down this route. Many years ago with Joe Pike, when we were replacing some bollards in house, I said, well, why don't you put charging plugs in? He said, I hadn't thought of that. A very easy thing to do. And also rather sad that they're now talking about road tax going on to electric vehicles. So it's kind of a mixed message coming through from government, which is a bit perturbing because a lot of people can say, well, yeah, you know, I'm not going to buy an electric vehicle, I'll buy a hybrid. And that's the way things tend to go. I'm a petrol head expert, you see, I'm the champion. But then there are other smaller things which didn't come up in there, Ben, at all. And one of those, something that this council used to do really, really well, and that's bathing water quality and wastewater directives. And how do we manage the climate, the physical climate change of more rainfall, more drought, more whatever. I remember I used to come in here every time I took a lorry load of oysters to France. I used to have an environmental health certificate. And at the same time, they'd come down, they'd measure the water quality. So this wild swimming thing that people are into, you know, can you imagine that at the height? They how wonderful you dive in and hit your head on the Tesco trolley if you don't sink 6 foot into the mud. So there's areas of it which may not look glamorous or holistic, but they matter to people. And if you can show them the rationale behind it, and that comes back to what Kevin said, which is it's education. But it's got to be quite carefully done because there's nothing people hate more than being lectured at, and particularly by a so-called expert. You know, X marks the spot. You know, a continuation of that saying. The rest of it is a drip, but they were never mind. So I think that absolutely agree with this. It's great, and it opens the door to quite a lot of interesting modifications. I'll repeat what I infuriated Kevin with in saying a lot of this, I hope, will come through the SPDs in emerging local plan, because that's going to be massive. If we can get to category A in a lot of our planning permissions, that would be a huge benefit to us in quantitative terms, in percentage terms. Oddly enough, I remember one of our officers called Ian Vipon many years ago at Highwoods, we were going to have a set aside area for experimental housing. And I noticed, I think on the old gin mill, where is it, as you go along to Old Heath? Yeah, Cannock Mill. That's such a good idea. Because what it's doing is it's saying you can self-build, but it will be built to basically passive house standards. And I think actually we've got some very good builders in Colchester. Obviously I would say Mersey Homes because they're doing that massive thing up at Chesterwell. If you can give them the incentives to build better. I remember I was on a government body years ago doing it. It worked out that if you went to passive house standards, it put an extra £37,000 on the cost of a house. Well, who's going to pay for that? It ain't the builders. All they will do is they'll just translate it onto putting a higher cost of doing it. That's where some huge savings, the amount we're growing, 1,000 hours a year, it would make them a huge amount. And I think bringing them on board, I don't think it'll take a lot of encouragement, actually. I think they're realising the way it's going. And again, lobbying our MPs. I know they're lobbying at the moment to get rid of the MMO. You won't know what the MMO is, but it's the most useless, crapulous. Sorry, we're being streamed, aren't we? God, what a bunch of bonkers. So, Ben, if you could sort of look at the water quality, it's important. The reason I'm bringing it up is it's important to Mersey because we get 20-odd thousand visitors there. Surprisingly, it's Colchester's only beach. And it's also the water quality directive impacts on the whole of the oyster fisheries. It has to be to a certain level. And it's a reassurance. People come there and it used to be a list of what the quality was. Do we still have an environmental health staff? Well, there we go then, Rory. Tell them. But anyway, no, I think it's great. I'm very supportive of it, but I think that it's the beginning. And then we've got to be sharp on the way we look at it and where we can make real gains, not just go for the national government ones, which we'll have to, but try and put our own stamp on it according to the area, which I think we are doing. Cannock Mills, I think, just so good. So, yeah.
Thank you, John. I'd like to bring Ben in. Kevin, you wanted to make another point?
Just very quickly, it's just a couple of things I've forgotten, then John probably, you haven't infuriated me, it must be someone else you're thinking of, because I think it's a great idea, by the way. So I just want to say two things. I mentioned the survey, because this will help people. Ben, I think it'd be useful if you contacted Sam and get certainly this panel circulated with the survey. This is a survey that's undertaken across Essex, but it gives a very clear direction what people are thinking. So we like to do surveys, don't we, in consultation, but it will tell you, and that's what will help guide a lot of this. The other question I had as well, so we ought to just reflect what the Environment Bill is going to say and what will force us to do. The idling policy is hugely important. I thought, but I'm a little bit rusty on this, it was certainly enforced in London. I don't know if it was then transported out to other parts of the country. I don't know if it was, and I don't think it is. So therefore, that might answer the question straight away. But idling is a huge problem. Now, of course, the one thing, and you're quite right, we don't preach to people, we help them because we know they want to do something, but they don't always know what to do. And that's where we need to help. That's our job in local government, to enable and to convene and to explain to people, certainly in this particular subject. But of course, I always say to people, if you have an electric car replacing a diesel car, it is still a car. That is not going to solve congestion. So that's where the active travel comes in. And that's why I wanted a transportation champion to work more locally on some of this stuff, because people will not get out of their cars, and nor should they, till there's a better, more reliable, cheaper alternative. With devolution, of course, we can have a transport authority, and then we'll be able to do this. But that's a nice slide issue, but it's all connected. And this is where, if you can travel anywhere around this city, and including rural areas particularly on this, with a very reliable bus service, then you will take that. If it gets to your destination quicker than you can drive, then that you will use that bus, because it's human nature to do that. And there's all sorts of things around the park and rides and the bid we could work together, where people don't have to carry lots of shopping around this area or other areas. They could just leave it elsewhere, and it's a locker style thing, and it's taken there for them. But I could go on for hours. There's so many things we can do, but fundamentally, I think the survey would be good, Ben, to help back up a lot of what you're saying. But also, we just need a bit of a breakdown on the Environment Bill as to what powers that's likely to give us, because waste is all. Must forget waste collection. That's a huge part of this, and what the restrictions will be on waste collection and disposal as well.
Thank you, Chris. Sorry, Ben.
Yeah.
You're frantically
Sorry,
writing everything down.
I
but
just wanted to
Chris,
come.
if you want to come
I just
in.
wanted to come back very quickly on Councillor Bentley's comments about public transport. Absolutely spot on. If you have an efficient, low-cost public transportation system, people will use it. And the Greater London Council back in the 80s had their fares fair, and it did. It got people off, and subsequent to that, London Transport got people commuting via public transport rather than using vehicles. My home area of my original home area of South Yorkshire, the South Yorkshire Metropolitan Council at the time had an absolutely effective public transport system. I could get a bus from a rural area, not too dissimilar to John's haunt in Mersey. I could get a bus every 15 minutes. And it was cheaper than taking a car or use a motor vehicle. So everybody used the bus. I mean, the bus was as busy at midday as it was at rush hour, because people used the buses, because they knew that they would be there and they knew that they were cheap enough to use. So having an effective public transport system is absolutely key to all of this. Can I agree with you?
Time as well, and I certainly don't want Councillor Giles' tea to get burnt. So Ben, if you'd like to come back.
Basically, I'd just like to say that everything that's been mentioned has been noted down, and there's some good feedback there. So from what I'm hearing, is that the council or the members would like us to create a climate change policy, but I think taking that, we're probably going to keep it quite simple. I've discussed how where that's brought back to, and we can discuss that offline. Just a few things on what people have said. Councillor Pearson, you asked for supplementary planning documents implementation date. I believe that's pretty much imminent. They would have gone for consultation early spring is what I last heard. So this year, so soon. I'm going to skim over the bits around to control emissions in the city centre, because I don't know. So I have to go and ask someone about that and what we have around that. I think the residents bit is really important about translating something that residents can understand. I think it's something we've tried to do within the new action plan that will be coming out. We've got a section on there for residents about what you can do. We've got a simpler highlights infographic about what the council has done that's a bit more understandable, we hope, for residents. And we know that there's several things that Essex are doing that we're going to try and jump on the bandwagon of, namely a app that they've been working with a company on that gives people ways that they can reduce their emissions and reward points and things like that for doing things like that. And with that, I think it's about communicating climate change in terms of very much a cost of living angle at the moment. Obviously, the energy one is pretty the big headline one at the moment, but obviously transport comes under that as well, because a lot of the active travel options can save money. But everything else has been noted, but I just thought I'd add those.
Thank you. I can't see.
Rosa.
Yeah, Rosa. I was going to say I can't see the other speakers, but there you are, Rose.
I just maybe a prompt for Ben as well. We've talked a lot about the activities that individuals can take, and we've talked about the roles of councils and how they take maybe a authoritarian kind of enforcement role, and even a simple message can seem a bit like it's an instruction from the council, as we talked about earlier. And what I just wanted to mention and highlight, and I don't know if Ben you want to add to it, but we have an awful lot of fantastic community groups, organisations and charities that have a very environmental, biodiversity, energy focus, doing a lot of fantastic work in the communities, whether be it fuel poverty or helping with bikes, etc. And I kind of just wanted to mention that because it's not just a role and the leaders in the community, but actually the most and probably the most effective action is that comes from the community and the people that work within the communities in these kind of organisations that target, help and support people and their families.
Thanks, Rosa. That's really useful. Adam, did I just see you in?
Thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to, I think officers could go away and look at developing a climate change policy. But for me personally, the climate declaration does exactly what that policy would say anyway. And I think that what we've heard from Ben tonight is just how much action is taking place across the council. And for me, it's the actions that matter. Not because I know how long it might take to go and do a policy and then come back to a cabinet member and then go away for some extra changes and then come back to the whole of the cabinet, and then it might go away for some other changes, and then it might come to policy panel for some other changes. And I think we made it very clear as an authority. And I think it was councillors that made the decision that we were going to declare a climate emergency. We did that. It says what we want to do. We want to reach net zero by 2030. There's lots more work required in order for us to achieve that. But I'd much prefer that officers went away and did the work to get us to that level than go away and write a policy that would sit on a shelf or on a website and not get us any further down that line. I think it's the actions that matter at the end of the day.
Thanks, Adam. Oh, councillor Coleman. No, councillor Coleman.
Oh, sorry.
No. Councillor King, did you want to speak or did you want councillor Bentley?
Well, it's up to you who speaks,
I
Chair.
tell you what, I invite
so,
you, councillor Bentley.
So I don't disagree. I do disagree actually with that. A policy doesn't have to be like a Bible. And if it's easier, you can have ours because it will do exactly the same thing. What is important is having a climate change emergency. We've got to hit net zero by 2030. You're not on course to do that. And you will not be on course to do that because you've got to clarify what that means. Okay, so what do you mean across the entire borough? Won't happen. Do you mean the council estate? No, no, I don't think it is clear. I think it's not clear for the public. So it's not just us, it's the public who've got to understand this. And then what we can do to help them. So the policy is about how you enable people to achieve this, not just us, but how you enable people to achieve it. It doesn't have to be a very long, lengthy tome. I think it's quite simple. You've seen it tonight. It's here. The policy is here. It just needs to be put in a form that people can understand. So I would argue strongly with a policy, because what is your reference back all the time? And then what about beyond 2030? So you're going to think to 2050, because you won't do it. You just will not hit it by 2030 in that time frame. So that's why I think we need a proper pathway. So I really disagree, but on this I will disagree because I think you need to have that framework in place, and it doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to go backwards and forwards. It doesn't need a big tome. You've seen from Ben tonight, a lot of it is there. A lot of what we're doing at Essex will mirror this quite easily. It could be done within a week.
Rory.
Thank you, Chair. So we do have a specific target around the council scope 1 and 2 emissions. So I think that is clear in terms of the expectation of what we're doing in terms of our own emissions rather than Colchester as a place. I think we do have a pathway, and we've actually used that pathway as a kind of illustrative model to residents in terms of what we're delivering on the journey. And I think there is a good point around looking beyond 2030, and we recognise the challenges in meeting that. And I know there's a lot of information on our website to Councillor Bentley in terms of what the council is delivering against this. Just to note, Chair, I see certainly from the notes I look at, there's not a consensus with the panel, and there's a mixed view. So as to you might want to just take a view on what the panel is recommending, whether there needs to be a vote. Owen, I don't.
I echo what you say. It does seem to be very mixed. I mean, when I read this first, sorry, part of this is if my phone goes, it Bluetooths, and all I can hear is my phone ringing. And now I've come back into the room. The challenges of being deaf is fabulous. It is a mixed bag. I get what Councillor Fox says. I mean, initially we were asked just to know, and it is not recommended that we have a policy. If we have, oh, for God's sake. Try again. If we have a policy, and as Adam said, it's going to be a lot of to and froing for what my view is pretty much embedded in our culture. That's my personal view. Chris, you suggested maybe a one-line policy just to dot the I's, cross the T's, that it is firmly embedded rather than just culture, because culture could change. So what is the views of the panel? Do we, and Councillor Giles obviously has a view.
I do, and I think that because we made the decision full council to agree that we have a climate emergency, that is not a policy. That's all we've done, is we've accepted that. If you accept it, you then need a policy to interpret it. And it doesn't need to be complex, doesn't need to be complicated at all. In fact, it's the sort of thing you can grow as and when you feel that you need it. And so from my point of view, I think it's perfectly sensible and logical that you have fairly basic policy. And, you know, we are the members of the panel. That's, if Adam didn't want to accept it, then that's fine, understand him. We're the panel, he's the cabinet member. Sorry, you know, and I see no reason why we wouldn't do this, because otherwise we're just going to be making airy-fairy commitments to some, sort of international policy. We need to have something that we can base what we can do. And without a policy, you can go anywhere. I'd much rather have some form of structure that we can build on. So my view is we go for it.
The leader.
I'm just going to suggest, given that we've forgotten how much accord there is on this, we're behind this, we value hugely the work the team have done. We note the progress that's being made. And actually, I looked at that diagram, like everybody else, watching the dotted lines and say, assuming that's based upon, as I understand it, is fact-driven projection, although we're not there, 2/3 of the way there, that's a mighty journey in prospect and start made. So I think if I could recommend to the panel that you capture in some sense your support, because it's here, and you leave with us, and because this is also for the Environment and Sustainability Committee, after all, to come to a view about what we need to add in terms of filling, let's acknowledge that there could be seen to be a gap, filling the gap. The most important thing is doing stuff, we agree, doing it together, we're doing all of that. Let's leave it as a recommendation to have a look at the degree of gap and how it might be filled if it needs to be. And let's just capture the sense of we're behind this before we hit midnight. Yeah.
I would say, Chair, that we should, part of our recommendation is to thank Ben for that work. It is extraordinary work.
Yes, I'll echo that. Thank you, Ben. Right, so.
Can we now note the work programme?
Sounds like a plan. I can smell your dinner starting to burn, John. So is everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, good. Owen, it's your big moment.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Jazz. Chairman, I think everyone will be happy to say that I'll take the report as read and take any questions if there are any.
Oh, Councillor Bentley, you have a question.
You mean the work programme we're not talking about, aren't we? So I just wanted to be reminded on the maintenance contract what we were doing, because if it's a contract, it's not a policy, it's a contract that should sit with the government ordinance. If it's around the policy, what the contract is, I just want to be reminded what we'd agreed, because I don't think it's our role to go through a contract. I think there's other people to do that. If it's the policy what we're doing, then I think, yes, of course it is. I just need clarification because I can't remember from nearly 12 months ago.
I can see Rosie eager to press the button to go.
So the policy panel agreed and put forward a recommendation to Cabinet, which was also agreed, that we would extend the current grounds maintenance contract for 3 years, and that the policy panel also wanted an annual update through that period. And so our intention in March is to give you an update on where we're at. In March, to be that'll probably be quite light.
Excellent. So any other questions on the panel or even programme? No, in that case,
Agreed.
I think I will. Yes, we've all agreed it. Sorry. Yes, we've all agreed it. Definitely agreed it. And I close the meeting. Thank you.